I've been on a waiting list for 4 years for this.
Can you see? You got a good view.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for inspection.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening, Your Worship.
Please be seated. Well, good evening, everyone. First meeting in the month of June, and great to see quite a few people in the gallery this evening, so that's awesome. So we'll get right to it. First item of business, Madam Clerk.
Roll call, Your Worship. I've taken the roll and all members of council are present.
Thank you. Next item, please.
A motion to adopt this evening's agenda, Your Worship.
To move Councillor Lupke, seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. Any changes or additions? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of recognitions, Your Worship, we have an exciting announcement and presentation of the 2022 Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators Award of Excellence.
Very good. Now you're going to have to lead me through this. I know I did participate in the CAMA award online. It was quite interesting, but I understand we do have some representatives of CAMA, and I know we've got some guests from BUPAC here as well to join in on this, so you can help me out how we're going to format this. If the
We do have the director for the Saskatchewan-Manitoba District on the CAMA board with us. She's going to say a few words to the audience, and then we'll do a formal presentation of the, we have a brief video we'd like to show, and then there'll be a formal presentation of the plaques.
Very good. So take it away. So welcome our CAMA representative. Please proceed.
All right, good evening. Good evening, Mayor Crest, councillor, staff, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to represent the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators this evening to present the City of Brandon with the Lois Award for Innovation. I am Jamie Pate, CAO for the town of Langham, Saskatchewan, and also the CAMA board representative for Manitoba and Saskatchewan. It was great to have Mayor Crest, your CAO on board, Chair, Aaliyah at BUPAC Chair, and Vice President of the Manitoba Métis Federation Southwest Region, and a number of other staff members from Brandon and BUPAC in attendance at our virtual award ceremony held on May 18th. I would also like to thank Ron for his membership and support to our association over the years. Each year, CAMA recognizes the value of excellence and professionalism in municipal administration through the annual awards program in areas of program excellence: innovation, environmental, leadership and sustainability, professional development and collaboration with external organizations and municipalities. Awards are presented to local governments and their chief administrators in recognition of their creative and successful programs, projects, and services. The annual awards program has been designed to encourage excellence in the art of professional municipal administration. Success stories are circulated widely to provide CAMA members and other local government managers with new ideas that may prove useful for implementation in their own communities. Because Canada has a unique mixture of small and large communities, the awards for innovation, professional development are granted according to population. We offer 3 population categories. For municipalities with a population under 20,000, for municipalities with a population between 20 and 100,000, and for those over 100,000. We were pleased to receive 5 award nominations this year, in which all were excellent. The following evaluation criteria were used by the committee when reviewing submissions: the extent that the program, project, or service involves innovation, creativity, exemplifies a significant change, its impact on the profession of municipal administration, the potential a program, project, or service possesses to enhance the practices of administrators elsewhere, and the degree their accessibility to other local governments. The impact of the program, project, or service on the municipality and the organization, even if the innovation itself was not unique to the profession, and the sustainability of the result, their long-lasting, positive, measurable effect on the success of the organization. The Willis Award for Innovation, awarded in recognition of Jack Willis for his contribution to CAMA, recognizes programs, projects, and services that demonstrate new approaches to leading, facilitating, or administering, which result in a positive change in the local government process and practices, and ultimately bringing outstanding benefits to the organization and community. This year's winner of the Willis Award for Innovation for municipality population 20 and 100,000 is the City of Brandon, through Truth and Reconciliation Week 2021, in partnership with Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council. I believe there is a video to follow, as well as a plaque.
Can you hear the sound?
Congratulations to the City of Brandon, Manitoba, winner of the 2022 CAMA Willis Award for Innovation in the 20,001 to 100,000 population category for the city's first Truth and Reconciliation Week, held from September 27th to October 1st, 2021. Uniting the community, the Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council, BUPAC, developed the week, 5 days of commemoration, celebration, and education, focused on the need for Indigenous and non-Indigenous people to gather in right relationship. The seeds of this remarkable road to reconciliation began in 2010, when Brandon's City Council created BUPAC. Its central principles of cooperation and collaboration help ensure Indigenous people are reflected in the community they call home. BUPAC is composed of leadership from influential Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations, institutions, and governments, as well as citizens at large. The existence of BUPAC and the services it offers has also deeply affected how City of Brandon departments now consider the needs of Brandon's Indigenous population in relation to life in an urban center on a day-to-day basis. It is fully recognized that 1 week is not enough, and while the next Truth and Reconciliation Week is being planned, BUPAC will work with the City of Brandon to find ways to weave cultural reconciliation teaching into municipal efforts. Congratulations to the City of Brandon, Manitoba, winner of the 2022 Kama Willis Award for Innovation.
Michelle and Leah and Janine up from BUPAC, and our representatives from CAMA, which stands for Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators. So Ron and Heather are members, and they're going to make the presentations to, I guess, myself on for the city and to the three representatives of BUPAC, unless Councillors Fawcett and Desjardins would like to come on up here. So come on up. We're going to come up this way so we can, oh, she left. We're going to include our camera, our banners in the shot.
Hi, Chris.
Team's making us come.
Yeah.
It's okay. We do it together. We all do it together.
Yeah, they kept pushing me.
Yeah.
Where do you want us?
We'll just hold the crowd in.
Yeah, I'll start with the BUPAC one then. So, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
To the people?
To the people.
Okay. No, it's you.
And
Want me to put it back to wide?
For the Indigenous people up here, that it matters. It makes us feel like this is our community, we belong, and we want to dig in and go hard. So thank you all very much for that. It's truly appreciated. And the new chair of BUPAC is very reluctant to take over, so she keeps pushing it to me. But I just promised her out in the hallway that I would be there for her and to help her every way I can, because I think it's always important to move on and let other people step up and become very comfortable doing, what they do. So I'm very proud of Janine. So you can't get away from here without saying something.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm Janine Pelche, the new chair. It's going to be impossible to fill her shoes, but I know Leah has offered to be my mentor, and I trust her. And I also trust the people that I'm meeting at council, at our table, and also the city councilors that I'm meeting along my journey. I'm a bit nervous, but that's okay. I'm First Nation Métis from a northern community. I'm part of the residential school, 60 Scoop. I have a story to share somewhere down the line with you all, and a good story behind it. So I'm proud to be here and proud to represent our Indigenous people and the people that I have met. Thank you so much.
Great.
I hand this over to the mayor.
Well, that's yours.
Oh, this is ours. Whoa. We're going to share.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say one of the things I forgot to do when I spoke at CAMA is some of the most important things, but sometimes even chairs for 10 years get a little nervous when they're talking at a level like that. And what I didn't do, I did thank very much Mayor and Council, but what I forgot to do was to thank the people of Brandon and our coordinator, Michelle Letourneau, and Chris and Jeff have been so supportive of us. We all need to take a little part of, the success that we have, but mostly to Brandonites who came out in droves to the Riverbank Discovery Center. They showed up, they participated, they learned how to set up a teepee, they came to the fire, they told their stories, the little children, and I spoke of this. As an Indigenous person, and probably many of you, you think, what is reconciliation? And it's not an easy place to go to think of what the definition could be. But at the very last day of the Truth and Reconciliation Week, when we had our little Métis steppers up on stage, they decided to open up their last dance to teach other children the Métis jig, the Red River jig. And it was only a matter of 2 minutes before the floor was full of children of all nationalities, and the fiddle player started to play. And all of those children started to dance, and they were catching on so quick. And some of us were sitting up on the hill, and I thought, you know what? You're watching reconciliation in action, Leah, right here, right now. And it was that week of being proud and being out there and putting ourselves out there that made that happen. So I just needed to share that too. That is true reconciliation, when children play in a very big way. So thank you for letting me go on.
You're welcome. Well done.
Okay, we're good?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so, the City of Brandon gets to share in this award. Really, we all know that it truly does belong to BUPAC, and it was certainly singled out for the first ever, National Truth and Reconciliation Day, which wasn't provided. The nation wasn't provided with very much notice on this. I think maybe about 3 months, 2 or 3 months notice, as I recall, and BUPAC just stepped up and wanted to make it special here in Brandon, to really kick it off with the first one really being a special one, and decide to make it a whole week. So it was a very big undertaking to take with very little notice, sort of no budget, no funding. The city did contribute, but many private sponsors and corporate sponsors did come forward. I credit Michelle Letourneau, the executive director of BUPAC, for really just going hard to get this on its feet, and it really showed when the event rolled around. And I think really positioned Brandon to be a leader in our nation for this new national holiday, national commemoration. And I'm very, very proud of BUPAC and of our community for taking such leadership on this very important aspect that's especially important in our community. And we're very lucky to have BUPAC providing this leadership and the bridges that they've built and continue to do so. So thank you very much, and the award is certainly well deserved for BUPAC, and City is certainly proud to play a small part in it. So thank you very much. So, and I don't know if our CAMA representative may have checked off the technology. Council will be reminded, I think recently we had a conversation about having to make an investment to make these hybrid new technology things work better in this council chamber. So that was evidence tonight as to why that is needed. So thank you very much to Kama and to our representative. She may have punched out now, but I'm sure Mr. Bowles will make them aware of that. So without further ado, I think we can move on to the next item, please, Madam Clerk.
That would be confirmation of the special meeting minutes from May 16th, 2022.
Mover, please. Moved by Councillor Cullen, seconded by Councillor Lupke. Any errors or omissions on the May 16th special meeting minutes? Seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
And confirmation of the minutes of the regular meeting of May 16th, 2022.
Moved by Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor Parker. Again, any errors or omissions? Not seeing any. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of presentations, Your Worship, we have Farah Anderson from Provincial Assessment Services to update Council on the tax impact for the 2023 reassessment.
Very good. Happy to have you. Come on ahead. Welcome.
Sarah Anderson. I'm the District Supervisor for the Brandon and Souris Assessment Services offices. My understanding is you have a copy of the tax impact report provided to you. Okay. I'm not going to read the report verbatim. I'm just going to touch on the highlights. This is the impact of the 2023 reassessment on your property taxes. So this report provides you, Council, with an overview of the impact the 2023 reassessment will have on the City of Brandon. For 2023, the assessed values have been updated on all properties to the new reference date of April 1st of 2021 from the previous reference date, which was April 1st of 2018. Well, note, we are normally on a 2-year cycle, but this is an odd year due to COVID. The cycle was pressed by 1 extra year, so we will return to a 2-year cycle come 2025. These updated assessments will be used for your 2023 property taxes. This report provides a little bit of detail on how the taxable assessments have changed within your municipality and across the province, and how it will impact your municipal and school taxes. The impacts of this report are based on 2023 modeling. The objective of the province-wide reassessment is to provide equity, fairness, and greater ratepayer understanding of how their assessments are. So the reassessment reflects how property values have changed since the last reassessment, which was in 2020. And these reflect changes to the supply and demand for real estate or the market conditions, new constructions or improvements to existing properties. Province's taxable assessment has increased by 10%, and the city's taxable assessment has increased by 4%. That first table you see on page 2 is your taxable or portioned assessment. So your single-family residential properties have increased by 2.7%. Your apartments have increased by 16.4%. Your condos and co-ops have increased by 0.2%. Overall, your residential has increased by 3.8%. Farm properties have increased 9.1%. Commercial industrial, 4.6%. Institutional, 1.7%. Pipeline, 7.8%. Railway, 16.2%, and your designated recreational, which is your golf courses, 2.8%. Overall, your city's assessment on average has increased by 4%. So, of course, assessment increases and decreases don't necessarily mean tax increases or decreases. Tax rates in this report are set out, so council sets out the municipal levy, the school division sets out the special levy, and the province sets out the education support levy. And only those properties seeing above average assessment increases will likely have an increase in taxes. But these impacts of this report do not take into account other taxes levied on the part of your municipality, so any local improvement levies or special service fees. The next page, you'll see the total tax change, which is your municipal and school taxes combined. And this is using a modeling method, so it's actually based on your 2021 mill rates that have been applied to 2022's assessment to come up with a budget and then recalculated against your 2023 preliminary assessment. So here you see single-family residentials seeing a 0.9% decrease, apartments a 12.3% increase, your condos and co-ops a 3.4% decrease. Overall, your residential properties are seeing a 0.1% increase. Your farm properties are seeing a 5.3% increase, commercial industrial a 0.5% decrease, your institutional a 2.2% decrease, pipeline a 2.6% increase, railway a 10.6% increase, designated recreational a 2.2% decrease. Overall, your municipality is seeing a 0.1% decrease. That chart below kind of gives you an idea, but based on the 2023 reassessment, 69% of your properties are going to see a decrease in taxes. 31% will see an increase, but only 3% will see an increase greater than $100. Next table, this is the municipal tax changes. Your single-family residential are seeing a 1.2% decrease, apartments an 11.9% increase, condos and co-ops a 3.7% decrease. Overall, your residential seeing a 0.2% decrease. Farm properties a 4.9% increase, commercial industrial a 0.6% increase, institutional a 2.2% decrease, pipeline a 3.7% increase, railway an 11.8% increase, and designated recreational a 1.1% decrease. Again, for a zero net change. So properties that see an increase less than 4% should see a tax decrease, and then properties seeing an increase above 4% should see a tax increase. On the next page is your options to moderate any impact. So there are 4 options available to council. There's the phase-in tax increases and decreases, varying of property class portion percentages, which does require provincial regulation, the establishment of a tax credit program, and other municipal tax tools, which are your special service fees and levies. And there are a number of property tax reduction strategies still in place. So there is the education property tax rebate, which for 2022 has been increased to 37.5%. For 2023, it's expected to go to 50%. And then you have the Manitoba Residential Renters Tax Credit. You still have the Education Property Tax Credit, the Senior School Tax Rebate, the Homeowners School Tax Assistance, and the Farmland School Tax Rebate. And finally, ways the public are learning about the reassessment. So the provincial website is being updated. Your property owners' assessment notices hit the mail today, so they should have them by the middle of the week. All the data used to set the reassessment rates for the City of Brandon are now available to the public on the website, so all the sales have been updated for anyone to see. This new for this year is the My Property MB, so all assessment notices have a little blurb about this on there. It replaces the property owners online in a more secure fashion, so property owners can see all their information for the properties they own for free, but they are required to create a user ID and password, so it's more secure. Toll-free customer service lines, assessment fact sheets. The assessment notice has a lot of information. There are open houses across the province. This year there is also the ability for ratepayers who cannot attend or do not feel comfortable attending an open house to arrange for a virtual open house after hours through Teams or Skype or a phone call by appointment only. They happen on every other Thursday. The first one available would be June 16th. They just have to phone or email our office to make that arrangement. And then municipal administrators, you guys get the calls first. This report should provide you with enough detail to answer most tax-related questions. That is the reassessment in a nutshell. Questions?
Thank you very much. This probably isn't the most exciting topic for lots of people, but for some of us it is, that we do like numbers and digging into this, and so you've provided an excellent summary here, and you know, lots of data there to support that. But we'll open up the floor for questions right off, if you don't mind. And Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good presentation and well documented in here. So I want to make sure that we're able to get information out for those open houses, so that we'll have information within the city so that we can put that out, because it is always important for people to get their assessments, know that, you know, May, June, July is when they can get in there and discuss them, because historically sometimes they discuss them later, and that's, so we want to really push that so that they do know that. And then just a quick question, just for clarity's sake, because I know we've asked this before over the years. With a number of years back, it was condos that had this great big change. This year, the noticeable change is the apartments. And now, give us a bit of a background on that. Some assumptions is there's been a lot of apartments built in the last 3 years, and that makes a big impact. But
That makes an impact. Apartments are an income property, so they're playing a bit of catch up in rents and expenses. So it just, it's their turn to play catch up. There is a lot of apartments, but rents, as apartments are renovated, rents go up. That drives the market rent, so it drives all of the apartments up in value. Plus, there are sales on apartments that drive the capitalization rate up. Also causes the value to go up.
yeah, so it's what our market is doing over the last 3 years. We did, a number of years ago, we had quite the discussion on condominiums, now it's apartments, and just a bit of explanation, which is good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Cameron, then Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the presenter. Just a really quick question, and this is kind of dovetails from Councillor Fawcett's question. You'd mentioned that mypropertymb.ca. Is that correct?
It's on our website, and all the assessment notices have the actual address, and I believe a QR code that was working.
Through Your Worship, just one really quick follow-up, if I may. Is there anything that residents are going to need? You mentioned that they'll be able to sign up for an account there. Is there anything that residents may need to be able to do that, like their roll number, something like that, to kind of align a property with their specific username?
So on their assessment notice, all property owners have a client ID. So they need their client ID and one roll number. Even if they own multiple properties, they only need one roll number to first sign up for that login. And then what it does is that client ID ties to all their properties. So then it brings all of their property information into their account, basically.
Perfect. That's much appreciated. Thank you.
And Councillor Berry.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Through the presenter. One of the questions I get asked quite frequently, and I probably will again this year, is appeals on assessments. What are the guidelines, the deadlines, the dates that people need to file for an appeal if they don't agree with the assessments made to the properties and that, and what steps they need to follow? Because some people leave it too late, don't realize they missed the deadline, that type of thing. So it's good to let them know, you know, what their timelines are for filing for an appeal on their assessments.
The appeal deadline is actually on their assessment notice. It is written.
Okay.
The first step they should do when they get their notices this week is not see that this is not a tax bill and throw it in the garbage, would be the first one. And they should look at it, and if they truly think there's something wrong, something seems off, a phone call to our office is the first step to speak to an assessor. And they'll go over all the characteristics. If something seems wrong, at that time they'll arrange for a reinspection of the property with the property owner to confirm the characteristics are right. That doesn't necessarily mean the property owner is going to be happy with the value. So if they go through all of that and they still don't feel their property value is right, that's when they would look to appealing to the Board of Revision. And the city's Board of Revision appeal deadline is September 19th for reassessment. So they would have to appeal to Board of Revision, which is here at the city, through the application process, which I believe is on your website. And that's how they would go through the appeal process, and then it starts into what we do on the appeal side of things. But their first step, anyone's first step, that should be to call and speak to an assessor to ensure those characteristics are correct in the first place.
Great, thank you for that response. Thank you, Worship.
I didn't have other hands up, so I'm going to plug myself in for a moment. And looking at the various property classifications and respecting that this reassessment, the reference time is April 1st, 2021. So acknowledging that was kind of like right in the middle of the pandemic, so it was kind of well into it. So we've had some discussions about, would the pandemic have some impact on some classes of property, and particularly we're thinking in terms of commercial properties, because the pandemic would have had some significant impact on especially some aspects of commercial. So interesting, and I suppose pleasing to see, and although the pandemic wasn't over by the time this was done, but that the commercial and industrial rather were up 4.6%, which was just a little higher than average, which to me is a little bit encouraging that that the commercial sector wasn't necessarily assigned a decreased value that may have been the result of obviously downturns in business due to pandemic. So am I correct in the way I'm reading that?
Yeah, COVID didn't play out the way a lot of people thought it would on market conditions. There are certain aspects of commercial industrial that were hit hard, and they're reflected in their assessment. But overall, we didn't see what maybe everyone expected to see. We didn't see a downward trend on actual sales coming in. So although it had an effect on most people's bottom line, they still were purchasing properties and still operating them where we actually saw an increase in value.
So if there were some, as you say, some specific sectors, commercial sectors that may have had a more significant downturn, that's included in there, but then they're filtered out by some obviously that would add an uptick, and the overall average is 4.6. So that's really what we can take to the bank, so to speak, that we're not going to see a significant downturn in our commercial assessment pool. Thanks very much. And then lastly, I guess the number, should a person be focusing though on the overall average? Like we always kind of have that number in mind when you get the call and say, oh my God, my assessment is up.
What I tell people is your taxes are modeled around that average 4%. However, if somebody has a specific type of property, talking specifics, you can compare them to their class of property as well. So although the taxes are modeled around that 4%, if you had a commercial property call and they went up 4.2%, they actually still went up less than the average within that class of property. So yes, overall on the city, they did go up more than the average, but they're actually right in line with what their class of property did. So it's good to have both those numbers.
So in your example, if that property was a little less than their class, their taxes are likely to go down a little bit.
Could go down a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much. So it was a complicated conversation, and but we get through it. Okay. Any other questions that council may have? This is always a very important and useful presentation to our community. So we really appreciate Ms. Anderson, you and your colleagues coming out and furnishing us with this information and making it public and providing some of the links that are available for people to get more information. This new, what do we call it, My Property account thing sounds like it'll be a useful thing for lots of people to use. So that's good to see those improvements. So good. Without further ado, thank you very much. A motion to receive would be in order, please. Somebody like to make that? Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. Any discussion? Call the question on the motion to receive this report. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. And we can move to the next item, please.
Community comments and feedback, Your Worship.
So this is a portion of Council's agenda that it holds open for any member of the public to come forward to provide feedback or on any item that's appearing on tonight's agenda, and a total of 15 minutes are allowed for this question period. I will note we do have one public hearing, and anybody can be heard, and it's on the urban beekeeping ancillary use proposal that's before council. So if you have intention to speak about that issue, you can be heard just at a couple of agenda items here down the way. But if you would like to speak about any other item that's on tonight's agenda, you're welcome to come forward right now. Yeah, come on ahead. Sure. Welcome.
My name is Debbie Parrott. Good evening, and you might remember my presentation that I got a little bit passionate about back in January with backyard fires. I do have a question. I just want to preface it with something. We started marking down on our calendar days where we had, or evenings where we had a lot of smoke in the neighborhood. So we started on Saturday, May 21st, and went up to Sunday of this past weekend. It was a total of 16 days. 4 of those days were rainy, windy, like high winds. So that brings that total down to 12. And 10 of those 12 days, we had substantial smoke in our neighborhood. So my question is kind of a twofold one. One has to do with the wind, because one of those days gusts were up to 50, 55, and there was a fire going somewhere. So I saw nothing when I skimmed over the information that the Brandon Fire Department is bringing forward. I saw nothing about wind. And my other question is, from noon to midnight, is the recommended time for fires to be allowed. How does that change anything that's happening right now? We had one afternoon out of these days that I counted where there was a fire starting around 3 in the afternoon somewhere, but they're already in the evening. That's the problem. So that's my twofold question.
Okay. Well, thanks and you obviously picked the right time to come forward. So thank you very much for fitting into the process here, and we value your feedback. So we will be hearing more about this, and council will be able to take your comments. I think you could see in the report that the fire service, with the direction of council, did sort of fan out and look at many municipalities and see what others, like I think ours is kind of wide open. You can have a fire any of the 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken now. And so they did discover that there was this limitation that, you couldn't have them at 8 in the morning and so on and so forth. So they're following what was kind of predominant out there. Not to say that's the right thing, but that's what's presented. And then we'll probably ask the question about the atmospheric conditions, like the wind conditions, if that should be taken into account.
I don't want to take all your time up here because there may be other people who want to speak. But I don't think that's going to solve the problem. And Brandon has listed itself in a number of reports as the I had no idea when I started doing my research just how much pollution this causes and how much it actually contributes to global warming. It really is alarming, and I feel very strongly that that's something that Brandon could take a firm stance on.
Okay, before you go, would you mind me asking you one question, since you did this wee bit of research, the kind of 16 days, and you documented what days were knocked out by rains and so on and so forth. So of those days that there were a lot of smoke, I think you said there were 10, were they all within the proposed hours, like from noon to midnight?
One was about 3 in the afternoon. The other ones were all in the evening.
Right, so none in the morning and other hours. Yeah.
Not that I noticed this time, no.
Very good. Good. Councillor Berry?
There was one. There was one at 10:30 in the morning. I live a block from Debbie.
Oh, okay.
I had one. I had to close my windows.
Yeah.
And that was at 10:30 in the morning. So
Our house has.
that was 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good. I think, do you mind if I ask if any member of council had a question of Ms. Parrott? Sure we don't lose you, so. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Sorry, Your
go
Worship.
ahead.
Yeah, as long as Debbie's up here now, there's the one debate her and I have had quite a bit over, and I just wanted to get her comment on it, was the comparison of the buffer zone we allow for fogging in Brandon for health reasons, with no medical evidence to have that buffer zone, which again allows people to not have their area or zone fogged because either they don't like it or there's a health risk, but they don't have to prove anything. And we've been given facts, information that from Debbie about what the carcinogens and whatever spill off from fire pits. Yet we don't offer that same service to the citizens of Brandon, saying, I really have a breathing problem, I have bad asthma, I had COPD or anything like that, to allow them to apply for a buffer zone so that it doesn't affect their health. And I just wanted to get Debbie to comment on that, because I know that's one of the reasons the fire pits bother you so much is because of the breathing issues, the migraines and others. And I have a few in my area like that deal with that same problem. So I just wanted you to kind of comment on that, Debbie.
Buffer zone is, I believe, going to be problematic in that if you create the same distance that there is for pesticides and for mosquito fogging, that doesn't prevent the smoke from down the block coming through and coming in and filling up our house. So I think it's a good idea, but I really believe the buffer zone would have to be very much more than what it is for those other two situations.
Okay. Thanks for your input. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll still, often not a very good timekeeper when it comes to this, especially when we're engaging with citizens. So I'll still keep the comment period open. If anybody else has any comment on any other this or any other item on tonight's agenda, we're happy to have. Come on ahead.
Good evening. My name is Craig Fraser. I live with Debbie. One of the questions I'd like to put to the council is, would you ever consider a referendum on whether or not to ban the burn? Because I'm new to the city. I don't know what process was in place when permits were allowed to have open burning in backyards. To me, I don't know what the value is to the city to have open burning in yards because of the pollution. The aspect is quite serious. So my question is, would you entertain a referendum so that the city of Brandon could answer whether or not they want open burning? Because my understanding is there's less than 3,000 permits that are allowed to burn in their backyard, and the city is 50,000 plus. So that's my question.
Yeah, again, I would say that we don't use referendums very often, and they're not a bad thing, and yet we make a lot of decisions on, pretty much every night on behalf of our community, and that's what council's elected for. And the topic of referendums is certainly a consideration, but we would be probably having a referendum on lots of things if we start going down that route. But it's certainly an option, but not something that.
Well, it is something that directly affects everybody's health. Whether you're in good health or bad health, you stand and smoke. You know, if a house burns down, the gases that are produced from what's burnt, you have no control over what people are burning in their backyards. You know, so that's a consideration that everybody should look into health-wise. So I think it would be something more along the lines of concern for everybody as opposed to where you allow 2-hour parking downtown, right?
Right. Yeah. Fair
That's
comment.
what I have to say on that.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, and again, coming back to community feedback period, we'll still entertain any other feedback on any item on tonight's agenda. Okay, not seeing any more. I think we can move on to the next item, please.
A public hearing, Your Worship, on the variation application for 240 18th Street for an urban beekeeping ancillary use.
Very good. I think we're going to open with a presentation from our administration on this issue, and then we're going to open up the floor to the hearing. Anybody who would like to be heard on the matter? So we'll call up our Director of Planning, Mr. Ryan Nickel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll keep it really brief here. The application is from Brandon University for their campus site, west 18th Street. This map here shows it at a distance, and this one shows it zoomed in. So the request being put forward is for urban beekeeping as an ancillary use. And if it sounds kind of creative, it's because it is. We have no provisions in the zoning bylaw around urban beekeeping. We've had different requests in the past. I recall having conversations, our department, with BU about some of these opportunities. And generally, we wanted to kind of look at the big picture and even potentially see if it's the right fit for the zoning bylaw. But then when we got to talking about it at kind of this location, this type of proposals for potentially research purposes, it seems like a fairly reasonable fit to come forward. I know the discussion of urban agriculture has come forward in the community, and the idea to entertain almost a pilot project through a variance process seemed like a reasonable thing for staff to entertain. So that's why the variance process was created. The Planning Act does allow for a variance to be approved. That's not in the bylaw as a use for a temporary time period up to 5 years. So that's what the process was brought forward. I'll certainly let the BU folks talk about their bee proposal because I know nothing about bees and should not talk about them in detail. But I can say that the proposal is for to be on top of the cafeteria building, and it's interior to the site, so it's not directly adjacent to any neighbors. And it would be on the rooftop to allow for a maximum number of hives. Since we don't have standards for this type of thing, it's a little bit hard to fit them in, but we did do some research and looking at the city of Winnipeg, and I know the applicant's done a lot of work, and it would check the boxes of kind of what the city of Winnipeg would look like for a similar type of use in an urban setting in terms of the number of hives being 4 and the location from adjacent property lines. Another requirement that's consistent with municipalities that do allow this type of thing is having qualified people run it, and I think the BU folks have checked those boxes and ensuring the folks have appropriate knowledge to operate an urban beekeeping facility. So from an analysis perspective, the use itself checks the boxes from a staff perspective on the Planning Act, and that was the recommendation brought forward to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission did make a decision to approve the variance request. Under the Planning Act, it can be a maximum of 5 years, which is kind of a good period for a trial run for this type of use. It also allows the city to explore it further potentially. Maybe we want to look at it in our animal control bylaw. I know that was one of the things that was flagged recently for council that potentially for the community to take a look at, and, as well as some other uses. There's one condition that they would provide confirmation that there's an apiarist certified by the province, and I think that's already been checked or will be in the near future here. There was one resident that spoke in opposition. I think that's in council's package here today, citing some concerns with additional bees in the area and potential impacts on folks with allergies or other, I think it was allergies to bees. And there was a appeal received, which is why we're here today. That's all I have. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nickel. We'll open the floor to any questions that they may have from council to Ryan. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Nickel, and you probably potentially won't be able to answer this or may be able to, but is there any indication, I was looking up like different communities, that sort of thing. City of Toronto has a big urban beekeeping membership group. Is there any indication on the level of travel that bees will make? You know, I know residents have raised a concern and concern within the confines or close to Brennan University. Is there any indication on travel patterns or that sort of thing that could ultimately impact a global number?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Cameron. As I mentioned, I know very little about bees, so I'm going to defer that to the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll ask that question again when the applicant comes forward. So, any others then specifically of Mr. Nickel? Okay, I think that, Councillor Cullen, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Ryan. Do you think that there'd be any sort of creep as far as, okay, we're talking about a rooftop installation right now, which I kind of like the idea of, just it kind of removes people from the bees themselves, like kids wandering into a space or those kind of things. So, but at the same time, once you set precedent and say, okay, well, BU's doing it, so like where do you see this going as far as in concerns with this application of making sure that, you know, we kind of maybe use that as a test pattern and or a test pilot project? Do you see, like once we've opened the can of worms, that now it becomes a backyard thing versus a rooftop thing?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Cullen. We haven't received a lot of requests for urban beekeeping, although there are a few here and there. So I don't think it's going to be a floodgates open kind of thing in the community. And this is a unique process because it's a university, it's significant separation. So there's enough to differentiate it if we didn't want to create a precedent. My thought was that I hope this wouldn't until we kind of looked at the big picture and set some framework in place and did some engagement and do the typical things we do with our process. I know from reaching out to Winnipeg, at least my staff did, they noted that they received very few complaints from the ones that they did approve in Winnipeg in terms of negative impacts. In fact, I don't think the Winnipeg staff had any records of complaints from neighboring properties as a result of urban beekeeping.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any others of Ryan? Okay, that is it covered. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll now open the hearing. I think traditionally we would probably hear from the applicant first, which often will provide additional information and answer some questions that maybe even the public would have and certainly council would have. So if there's a representative of the applicant, we would be happy to hear from you now. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Your Worship and councillors. My name is Deanna Smid. I am an English professor at Brandon University. I'm part of a committee that's been working on potentially getting bees at Brandon University, and I submitted the variance application. I believe you have the application, so I don't want to repeat everything that's in there, but I do want to say that we had no idea how timely our request to have beehives on the roof of Harvest Hall would be. You've probably seen news reports recently of how catastrophic the bee die-off has been this winter. I know the APRS who is planning to help us this summer has lost 80% of his bees. So there is, I almost want to say a sense of despair right now amongst Manitoba beekeepers. We're hoping that, especially in the Westman area, having bees in Brandon, on Brandon University's, one of our rooftops, will provide a sense of hope, perhaps, a sense of excitement that something new is happening. From speaking with some local beekeepers, I've also heard a lot of interest and, again, hope that Brandon University itself will begin to take over or augment some of the research capacity into bees, bee testing, that sort of thing, that right now is completely centralized in Winnipeg. So I didn't know this until beginning this process and doing some research here, that most, or at least a significant percentage of the commercial beekeepers in Manitoba are in the western side. Right, so they're in our area, but all of the testing that has to be done for mites, for disease, for general health of the bees, that has to be sent to Winnipeg. So there is a hope, and of course I can't make any promises, I can't speak on behalf of everyone at the university, but there is a hope that having bees on campus will inspire and will provide the impetus to move, or at least to have additional resources for that sort of testing, so that beekeepers can be sending their products and their samples to Brandon rather than to Winnipeg. But that is something that came up as a possibility kind of after I wrote this report, or the application for the variance. Another thing I want to stress from the variance application is the steps that we've taken for safety. And one of the major ones is placing the beehives on the roof of Harvest Hall. It's actually going to be extremely annoying for our beekeeper to get up to the hives. You have to go through the back end of Harvest Hall, which is not accessible to students or to any member of the public. You have to awkwardly climb up an interior ladder to get up to the surface of the roof. And we've chosen that site specifically because of that difficulty, so that no one, unless they are extraordinarily inspired to get up there, is going to be able to tamper with the hives or even just get too close out of curiosity, because that is where the biggest danger for bee stings occur, and that's right near the hive. So because the hive is going to be mostly completely inaccessible to anyone without authorized access, we're hoping that danger to the community, and we recognize that there is some potential danger, is mitigated. We are also working with someone who is very experienced in beekeeping. His family has been working in beekeeping for the last 100 years, and he is going to be assisting us in making sure that the bees are not aggressive, that when the hive is opened, the appropriate measures are taken to make sure that the bees are calm. To answer the question of the scope of how far bees fly when they forage, they can fly up to 5 kilometers and regularly do, which means that we already have a fair number of honeybees in the city. I actually live fairly close to Brandon University. I see honeybees in my garden all the time. So that 5 kilometer radius means that you're not going to have a real concentrated kind of clump of bees all around the university. They're going to be spread out. In fact, most urban beekeeping projects, and there are a number in different urban centers in Canada, remark that often cities don't even notice a large increase in bees simply because of that 5 kilometer radius for the foraging. Now, there was a question that the Planning Commission asked me, and I didn't know the answer. So I am very excited to tell you that I did find an answer, and I'd like to share that with you. So one of the commissioners asked me, of the urban centers in Canada that allow urban beekeeping, has there been an uptick in complaints or bee stings, anaphylactic shock? That information is not easy to find, but I did my best, and I found a couple of examples. So the City of Calgary, in 2018, hopefully I remember all these numbers, and I brought them in case I can't. In 2018, they estimate the number of hives in the city as 1,250 or thereabout. Generally, they have fewer than 10 bee-related complaints every year. And most of those complaints are related to bees seeking out a neighbor's water source. which can be rectified if the beekeeper just keeps a water source by the hive. And that's something that we are definitely going to do, and we have spoken with physical plant at the university to make sure that that's in place. The other numbers that I have are from Saskatoon. Saskatoon is a very early adopter of urban beekeeping. They have 93 registered beekeepers within the city, and in 2019, they had 3 complaints about bees. And again, majority of those, so I guess at least 2, were related again to bees being attracted to a neighbor's water source. So I'm glad I have the chance to answer that question because it burned in my soul that I didn't have an answer at that point. If you have further questions, please ask, and I will do my best.
Thank you very much. That's a very enthusiastic presentation, and it's good to see the professor gets thrown off when they can't answer the question, that when the students can't answer when you ask. So it's good that it's kind of reciprocal. So that's encouraging. So I have Councillor Lukey and then Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our presenter. You did answer the one question that I had written down, which is what's actual bee zone, so that's the 5-kilometer radius. The other question, and you talked about the water source, the other question I had, are there any additional, I guess, mitigating things the university can do to try and, I guess, keep bees close to home, so to speak, or are they going to roam no matter what might be in their general close area?
Yeah, they'll roam no matter what. You actually want them to, because if we kept all of those bees in one area, you'd probably notice quite a few bees in your backyard. But because they're spreading out so widely, they will most likely not be noticeable. It's highly unlikely that anyone in the city of Brandon will actually notice that there are a significant increase in honeybees in their yards. The 5-kilometer radius will also assist gardens and pollination and biodiversity within a 5-kilometer radius. So there is no way of keeping them, and I don't think we would want to. Thank you.
Just to follow up, because that was going to be one of my questions, is some of the benefits to not only the immediate area, but obviously the general area as well. Did you researched your hard to answer question on a couple others, but did you have any research from those cities as well on maybe some of those benefits to the city as a whole from some of these urban beekeeping initiatives?
I didn't look that up, so now I have another question that's going to be burning my soul. Thank you. A lot of or at least a number of the urban beekeeping initiatives are fairly new. And I think that the sort of increase to biodiversity might take a little bit of time to really notice. I don't want to stand here and promise that everyone is going to have more cucumbers this summer, for instance. It's a possibility, but that might be a little bit more difficult to see immediately. But hopefully, and in theory, there will be an increase in biodiversity, in pollination, and therefore in the success of people's gardens, fruit trees, more nests for other creatures, and so on.
Thank you.
Okay. And Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. A couple of things, because this is kind of interesting, and I'm much more comfortable because we haven't really got into it as far as some of these other communities have. Having a sort of the university or the college or somebody sort of running this, I think that's good because we actually can get data from them. They'll have the proper people monitoring, and so I'm comfortable with that versus this just sort of being John on 4th Street. Also, we just had a pollinator garden put in up at the riverbank, quite a large donation from local residents. So, we're kind of trying to do the same sort of things, help out. A couple of quick questions that might just be asked in public of us. Because it's honeybees. Will they be aggressive?
They shouldn't be, unless you are getting close to the hive. They should not be aggressive. If you step on one, perhaps. If you try to catch one, while it's foraging. I'm trying to imagine instances where a honeybee would want to sting you, because essentially it's committing suicide. So a bee will do whatever it can not to sting you. So only if it's extraordinarily feeling threatened, or if it feels the hive is threatened. That's when a bee is likely to sting you.
And in this case, the hives are on the roof.
That's right. The hives are largely inaccessible.
Just again, real fast, because I think you've got some of these ideas. Will bees swarm? This is just general questions that I could ask.
Yeah, they can. So swarming is when a huge mass of bees leaves the hive to create a new one, essentially. They can. Swarms are even more docile than bees are usually. But you might have seen pictures of people just scooping them into boxes with their bare arms. The key for both swarming and for aggression is our beekeeper. Swarming can be anticipated and also mitigated by an experienced beekeeper. Aggression can as well. So our beekeeper is Mike Clark, and he was unable to come tonight simply because he needed to take advantage of the good weather to work with his own bees. He assured me when we were talking earlier that if he notices that the bees at BU are aggressive, he will replace the queen bee with one of his own that he knows is not as aggressive. So our beekeeper is one of the keys here, location and beekeeper.
And Alex, that's another one. There's other questions to ask too. This is a more general one too about mosquito fogging, which we possibly do. Because we often say, the bees can be affected.
Yeah. Again, because mosquito fogging takes place in the evening, takes place usually after 10 p.m., I believe, that's when the most bees should be back in the hive. And that offers them a protection from mosquito fogging. So I believe Winnipeg has come to the same conclusion that essentially the timing of the mosquito fogging keeps the bees safe.
I'm not the expert in that, but I know that we've often been told that the mosquito fogging today is in such a microparticle that's kind of size for these tiny mosquitoes and does not have effect of the larger insects such as bees. And Councillor Chaboy.
Thank you, Worship. Through the presenter, I'm actually quite proud of our designation of being a bee-friendly city, and so I'm going to be speaking on behalf of the bees. Are the bees going to be safe in an urban environment? Because I know that there still are property owners and people that use pesticides on their properties. Is that a concern, or are you keeping track of that data to ensure that we're not, putting the bees, vulnerable bees, in an environment? Is this the best site for them?
Thank you for asking that. I had never even thought about the possibility that the bees themselves might be in danger. We're hoping that because the bees will be in people's backyard, like not literally but figuratively, right? They're in the city. People know that there's a hive in the city. We're hoping, perhaps idealistically, that people will feel a sympathy and awareness that they otherwise might. And again, I know I might be ridiculously idealistic thinking that way, but that is certainly our hope. I didn't want to bring up Bee City Brandon simply because Bee City Brandon deals particularly with native pollinators and not with honeybees. But I think that through Bee City Brandon and other organizations, there has been a hopefully effective campaign advising people what to do to protect bees and what not to do. Simple things like don't mow your lawn in May. That's my favorite one. Don't mow your lawn. Don't rake your leaves. Leave your yard a mess. I know that it's going to run counter to some people, but hopefully enough will follow this advice, or at least care to try to do that, that the bees may not be harmed. But that is something we will certainly keep an eye on. If it turns out that the bees are returning to the hive weak or in lesser numbers, we will take note and respond accordingly. Well, that sounded aggressive. We'll make sure that we're not putting the bees in harm's way.
Okay, and Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to the presenter. I'm going to kind of take off on what Councillor Chabois talked about with Bee City and that, but also something we had presented to us earlier tonight. And that's, sorry, keeping the bees safe. Now, there's honeybees and there's normal domestic bees and that. And we've talked about the fogging zones for pesticides and that. What we haven't talked about, and I read a little bit about this, and please don't think I'm an expert because I'm not, but bees are vastly affected by smoke, but also attracted to it. So somebody smoking a cigarette, bees are attracted, but it'll actually kill them. And I'm thinking the same thing, the toxins we get from fire pits. Like you said, bees don't take canopy until 10 p.m. And quite often they're out in the daylight, in the daytime and everything else, and we've got fire pits going in the city. How adversely will that affect not only your honeybees, but I know the effect it has on the regular domestic bees that are flying around. And we are supposed to be a bee city, a bee-friendly city. So
I really wish that Mike Clark were here. I don't begrudge him working with his bees today on this beautiful weather. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a sad day for me. I'm going to go home with so many questions.
Well, you know what? You don't need to take this to heart. We're only asking questions. They don't have to be burned into your soul, as you put it. But I notice you're a professor of creative writing and English and drama, so it's a good fit. So I did have a question. I didn't have other hands up. I thought I saw it, but then I couldn't find it again. Like the volume, if we want to call it, like how many hives are anticipated on the Harvest Hall there?
Yeah, we've requested a maximum of 4 hives, or requested permission for a maximum of 4 hives. This year, we hope to start with 2. We see this year potentially as a bit of a pilot for the following 4 years, if permission is granted. So we don't want to, bite off something more than we can chew in this first year. So we're starting with 2 hives only.
And how many bees would be in a hive on average?
It can be anywhere from 20 to 80,000 per hive.
Okay. And I think so. Councillor Desjardins.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. It's an interesting conversation. Are there any risks through your worship to the presenter? Are there any risks to the native pollinators or the native bees competing with the honeybees?
Yes, there are risks. And I believe I noted that in my application as well. There are potential risks, and I do not want to deny that. There have been a number of studies about the effects of honeybees on native pollinators. One of the potential problems is that native pollinators could be out-competed for whatever food sources are available. The other potential problem is that honeybees could carry diseases that then transfer to the native pollinators. We are asking for the number of hives that we've requested because we don't want to make this problem a reality in our city. We are not asking for so many bees that they will overwhelm the native pollinators that we already have. So that's one of the major reasons why we've asked only for 4 hives. We are also very, very open and willing to work with researchers to find more about the interaction between honeybees and native pollinators. And if it turns out that our honeybees are indeed detrimentally affecting the native pollinators, then I think we would have to revisit the hives. This is, I hope, going to be a real time of research and discovery, and not one that is adding problems to the native pollinators that are already in quite some peril.
Thank you. And with Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. There's a good question by Chris, but one of the things I wanted to just clarify is sometimes like numbers, 80,000 in a perspective. If we added 80,000 people, it would be very noticeable. If we added 80,000 ants to the city, probably not as noticeable. Where's the bees fit in that?
You're looking at more of an ant situation. Yeah. From everything that I've read about projects such as this, and one example is the Bee Project apiaries in Winnipeg. They place hives on banks, on quite a number of schools, and other public buildings. They have reported that the people working and living in the areas where they have hives don't even know that there are hives there. So the 80,000 bees, when they spread over those 5 kilometers, then they almost disappear.
Okay. Yeah, just context-wise, because it seemed like a big number. I just did context-wise.
And then when they're in the hive, like it doesn't, like obviously the neighbors aren't noticing, doesn't sound like some Evinrude motor running with their all. That can be creative writing too. So.
Yeah. I have so much to answer with that question, but no, it shouldn't be deafening to anyone.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up. I'm going to close with one more. What would you say, because I'm sure I could see you take this extremely serious and trying to get all the answers, that there may be people that may live within blocks of Brandon University, where these hives are going to be, and they may have allergies and whatnot. Obviously, you've done the research of where these exist and to check out if there are complaints and if there are risks to neighbors such as that. You know, we know that Brandon University is a very community-minded institution, very important part of our community, and you would obviously be taking that sort of thing fairly seriously. So, and what would you say to someone that would ask that if they live near the university or throughout the city?
Yeah, absolutely. And I recognize that bees can be scary. If a bee gets too close to me, I'm gonna back away. I think it's an instinctual response to something that's that foreign and different. And also, we know that they can and do sting from time to time. So I don't want to deny that fear and the legitimacy of that fear. At the same time, I do not believe that these hives are increasing harm to anyone who lives around the university or within the city of Brandon. I would not stand here and propose this variance application if I believed that I was potentially harming someone. I couldn't do that. But I also recognize that, especially if you have an allergy that's serious or even not serious, that bees can be terrifying. And I feel awful about that. But this project, from everything that I have read, that I have researched, when I've spoken to people who have done things similar to this, to beekeepers, I don't believe that the harm is increasing for anyone.
Thanks for that. Didn't see any other hands up. The council covered off. Councillor Schway.
Just one little question. How do we identify the difference between a native pollinator and a honeybee? Are we going to notice honeybees in our yard? Like, their appearance is different?
Their appearance is different, yes. We have hundreds of native pollinators in Manitoba. Just this morning on my cherry bush, I saw a mason bee and a sweat bee. Sorry, that's one I don't see very often, so I was pretty excited. Honeybees are certainly smaller than bumblebees, which I think are the most noticeable just because they're so gigantic. Unfortunately, they look a lot like wasps, which also makes them very terrifying. I am not ashamed to admit that I am terrified of wasps. But yes, especially if you just take a look at, this is what a honeybee looks like compared to some of the other pollinators, then yeah, you can see the difference. Yeah.
Okay, I think that covers it off. So thank you very much, Dr. Smid, for a very comprehensive presentation and very enthusiastic one at that, so appreciate it. Okay, we'll continue with the hearing now. We've heard from the applicant, and we'll certainly hear from anyone that would like to speak to this application, both for or against, and we're happy to hear all points of view on this, so please come ahead.
Some of you that don't know me, I'm Barb Strutt. I'm the one that, the reason that we're here today is because I oppose the beekeeper thing. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, just relax. We're not that hard to get along with.
I know that. Yeah, I opposed it because I don't think university should be a place for bees, because I think it would have been much better off at ACC up on the hill. As you guys must have got my letter that I wrote, my grandson is deadly allergic to bees. I mean, if he gets stung, we have to go to emergency right away. I need to calm down a bit.
Yeah, that's okay.
I mean, and I do not think it should be in an area where there's a lot of people. I'm sorry, I just don't think there should be. It's not a proper place. And I did some research too. And a beehive, and I think she knows how many bees. There's 50 to 60,000 bees in a beehive, not 20,000. If they have 4 beehives, you know how many bees that's going to be? You know how many people live in Brandon? 50,000. And we're going to have like somehow 200,000 bees in 4 years. And I'm sorry, if she told me that maybe my grandson should take precautions to stay away from bees. If you're deadly allergic to bees and you see a bee coming at you, you're not going to run away. You're not just going to sit there and say, okay, I'm not going to worry about you. Your instinct is to try to get your arms moving and run. And of course the bee is going to chase you. I also talked to a beekeeper out of town, which his first name is Bill. I can't remember his name. He said, bees have sensitive ears. And they allergic. If they hear dogs barking, cars, horns barking, it'll set them off. And if you wear color yellow, they will go after you for the color yellow. And yes, he said they are aggressive. They can and will be. And they don't just go out like normal bees. So they don't just go out like 4 or 5. They go in swarms. And if you're telling me, like, if kids are playing in the schoolyard and they see these swarms of bees going and kids are allergic, they're not going to get scared. It's just not right. It should not be. And what about if somebody else decides down the road? Are we just going to let people have bees all over the place in the city? Do you not care about people that are allergic? But yeah, people at schools, they won't let bees like peanuts in schools because kids are allergic to peanuts. So do not people that have allergic to bees have the same rights? I mean, I don't think it's right. I know we're a bee city, and I understand that. But I do not think bees should be around a place where there's lots of people. It's just not a right place to be. If you'd like to ask me some questions, I'm willing to answer.
Very good. I appreciate that.
And I'm sorry I'm not just giddy or whatever.
This is good. We appreciate your feedback and appreciate that you're prepared to answer some questions. So we're going to open the floor to council if they have any questions of you. So, Councillor Schwoy.
Thank you, Worship. Have you talked to the applicant about other potential locations for these hives?
Yes, I did.
What was the response?
They said no, that it was okay at the university and it was a set, and that was it. I didn't know about the application till just much before it. Only reason I know it because my daughter lives on 321st on 21st Street, 356. And it was in the mailbox, and she didn't see it there for days. And for the first meeting, I had like about 4 or 5 days notice to come to the first meeting. I mean, and I'd like an answer from you guys. Say, okay, now, somebody decides they want to have bees. Are you going to let everybody in the city have bees? Is that going to happen? I mean, I know we're a city of bees, and we're just going to let people have bees in the backyard, and the neighbors, we just got over COVID for 2 years. So people get rid of normal bees. They get rid of hives. They put stuff in the backyard so they don't want to attract any bees. They're not going to do any different because it's a honeybee. People just don't want to be bothered with bees. So I'd like to answer, who would like to answer? Are you just going to let anybody that wants to apply for an application now? Because we're a city of bees, and we're going to have bees in your backyard, your neighbor's backyard. You won't better go out of your house because there's going to be bees all over the city.
So the answer to that, I don't mind, is as you can see, they're not universally accepted. Like right now, to have them, you have to apply for a variance application. So that's why it's come before us. So nobody can just go and install one. So this would be kind of the first, as was kind of presented. Many cities do allow them, and there'd be many of them, and individuals could have one. So your next door neighbor could potentially have one in these other cities. We don't have that. So this is seen as a bit of a, I guess, a pilot project. So a question I might ask you, Ms. Strutt, is how would you feel the fact that this pilot project, at least being done by the university, is putting up on top of a high roof, and there's a big campus, so the nearest property, like if our first application was a private citizen who wanted to put one in their backyard or on top of their garage, I mean, they're tightly packed around with residences, that could be a or precarious place to start. So, you know, I wonder what your opinion would be, the fact that it's the university, it's obviously got the technical skills, you know, a lot of scientists there, and engaging a highly qualified beekeeper. You know, we're trying to look at this as, you know, we like to walk before we run. So this would be the first one we'd have. So this would be probably as good a initial applicant that we can to test this out to see what kind of effect it has. If it's wreaking havoc on our community, you heard from the applicant that, you know, they take this very seriously. They would probably want to back off if it's causing a lot of problems. So how do you feel about the fact that it's the university and in the setting that it is instead of just some random...
Well, I don't feel much better because the bees are still going to go out no matter where they are. The bees aren't going to stay on top of the roof. And they're not just going to go out like normal bees, like, let's go here, let's go, 5 go here, 5 go there. They go, I did some research too, and I talked to some bee owners, and they said the bees go out, they go out pretty much all together. One goes out at scouts, and then they go, and then they all go out together. And he does not think a beehive should be in the city. So when I talked to the beekeeper. So I would like to, I know you're probably not going to reverse this, but I would like to be able to come back next year before the bees are let out and have people come to the meeting that want to come and speak against it and say their voice and you know, have an opinion to say whether they liked it or not and how it went. I would like to revisit it.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of why it's a pilot project that we can...
But I'd like to be able to do like next year before,
Right.
Because this year I know it's later, it's cold, but if it gets real nice weather, the bees can be out at the beginning of May.
Right. Okay, I understand you. Okay, we're going to keep answering questions. Anybody else have any questions of Ms. Strout? Did I say that right? Is it Strutt or Strout? Okay. Okay, I think that's got it covered. Thank you very much for coming out and providing your feedback. It's very valuable for us to hear this. So
when would I know if you were going to allow it to have a revisit next year before the bees went out?
Well, we'll have to talk to our planning department about what, first of all, the first step has to happen is we'll be dealing with this application and whether or not it's going to be approved or not. I think that happens tonight. Isn't that right, Madam Clerk?
Correct.
So we're going to find out tonight whether or not this first application, then in terms of what happens in terms of the process for the aftermath, we'll have to just check with our planning department and probably in consultation with the university. Like, I think we're in better shape that it is the university is going to be a you know, more collaborative operator in this than perhaps some others. So we can get back to you on that answer.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the hearing is still open, so we're glad to hear any other feedback, both for and against this application, and please come ahead now. And I'll just ask one more time if anybody would like to be heard on this particular application. Appears that has it covered. So a motion to conclude the application. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the public hearing with respect to variance application V0522 to allow an urban beekeeping ancillary use at 240 18th Street be concluded.
Seconder, please. Councillor Parker. Any discussion? This is just a motion to conclude the hearing, so probably not. Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. At what point does council, you know, it says here City Council has the following options with respect to the application, and B says with or without conditions, because Ms. Strutt talked about maybe in a year time have a review with the citizens on how it went. When do we do that? How do we do that?
If I may, through Your Worship, to Councillor Chaboyer, you can make, following the conclusion of the hearing, a motion can be put on the floor to either reject the application, accept the application with conditions, or like whatever you like. There is a recommendation there, but you certainly can make whatever changes or add on conditions as you see fit. So that would happen right after the conclusion of this hearing.
Okay, so we will call the motion on just concluding the hearing right now. So all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And is it elsewhere on the agenda, or we roll right into it here?
Yeah, we go right into it, Commissioner.
What is council's wish? Putting a motion on the floor would be in order, and then we can debate it. Councilor Boyd?
Thank you, Worship. I would approve the application with the condition that this is a pilot project, that we'll get a full report and a review and even a public hearing on it to see how it went with the citizens next year.
Okay, so seconder, please. Councilor Cameron. Mover wish to speak?
Thank you, Worship. I think I spoke. I think that, that's a legitimate compromise for Ms. Strutt. She's raised a serious concern, and I think that, we have an obligation to keep our citizens safe, and this would be a way that we can hear from the residents on, if they have any concerns about this project.
Thank you. Seconder wish to speak?
No, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, and I have Councillor Lupke.
Your Worship, I guess just the question on point of order, like, are we allowed to have another public hearing on a variance that we're approving tonight?
City Council can have a public hearing on anything they want. Truthfully, there's some public hearings that are legislated within the Municipal Act, but City Council can have a public hearing to hear representation as information, certainly on any matter that they want to.
Well, I think our Director of Planning and Buildings could also provide some feedback.
To Your Worship, the City Council, just maybe a point of clarity or direction here is that the submission does include a recommendation from staff and decision of the Planning Commission. So that wasn't included because this is an appeal. Like it's not, and it includes 2 conditions.
Right, that was in your report. It was not included on because this is a new hearing.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Madam City Clerk. I just want to make sure that those conditions aren't missed by City Council in their deliberations, because there was a condition that talked about it being valid for 5 years, and that there be a provision that it be a certified apiary confirmation provided. So if there's additional conditions, it would be staff recommendation that those would be considered in addition to these. Of course, City Council doesn't have to do what staff's recommending. I just want to make sure Council understands that was the recommendation and the decision of the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Any questions of Ryan on that? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Boyd.
Okay, on conditions, is there a condition that you've considered if there was swarming happening this year that we would have to revisit or stop the application? If there is a serious problem that did arise this year during the pilot project, are you cognizant, aware of adjusting or stopping the process if we have a problem?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Chaboy, we didn't add conditions just because in this case, at least from a staffing perspective, we felt the applicant had done their due diligence in providing the research to justify the support of a decision on a 5-year. Certainly, I mean, and putting a condition that says like if it swarms, it's like I think those things become very difficult to track and enforce. Perhaps council could consider a report submitted by the university that tracks their progress, submitted at a 1-year mark to the city for review and consideration. I think we have a unique opportunity here where we have a fairly qualified applicant who's been kind of openly stating that they're going to be, actively tracking the success of their program, and they could submit that to us for review, and we could bring that forward to council if that was the desire, or perhaps we're just sharing it with council that there's a check-in. I mean, of course, council can schedule more public hearings, but that would be a first for me. Not that there can't be a first for everything, but if the approval is for 5 years and we're reviewing it, what are we taking feedback on? Are we thinking that we're going to revoke it? If that was the case, we should approve it for 1 year. That's
No.
maybe not. So then
Sorry.
I just want to make sure that we're being reasonable with the applicant as well with our process.
Just
Okay, just hang on a sec. Okay, good. Well, then we'll go ahead, Councillor Desjardins.
No, sorry, through your worship, it just says it's, like, the recommendation is for up to 5 years, so I don't think we have to change anything there. Like, it's up to 5, so we can ask for an annual report every year, and if things are going well, then this is status quo for 5 years, but if there are some concerns being brought forward, then we can adjust accordingly.
I missed the up to myself. I just saw the 5 years. So that does kind of provide some latitude that it's up to 5 years, but it, you know, it's probably infers that it's subject to, you know, a progress report, and if it, there's, you know, we're getting a lot of community untoward feedback, you know, we'd have to work with university to look at either mitigating the difficulties or, you know, seeing it wind up.
Through your worship, if it's council's will to have a report, I think that should be added as a condition that there be an annual progress report to city for review and consideration as an extra condition.
Okay, I think then just to keep things square, I'd like to ask for an amendment to that effect. Councillor Lupke, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to amend the original motion to have the university provide annual reports on the project through the course of the entire project. So whether it's up to 5 years or they decide to end after 2 years, whatever the case may be.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cameron. Will further speak?
Well, just briefly, I think we're kind of making a leap of faith that the university will monitor this closely themselves, but I think it's our requirement to kind of have the information presented in front of us to make sure that our residents are satisfied with the way the project is going. So I think it's a good maybe compromise in a lot of ways to have that opportunity to have the university report back to our staff first, and then obviously to council through the process.
Good. Discussion on this amendment. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would agree with Councillor Lupke there. I think this is a happy medium as far as feedback from the residents and giving the residents a vehicle to have have a report the same as council would, because ultimately it's incumbent on council to share that report with residents, both for and against it. So I think this is a good compromise that will allow the research to move forward, but also being cognizant of potential concerns from residents. So supportive of this.
Other discussion? Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. I think it's great to have them come back, and any excuse that we have to have anybody from the university or college to come in and talk about their research is a benefit to the community. Like, there's so much good research going on in those places all the time that nobody knows about. So I would like that, and I'm glad it got put in there because I would have wanted to know myself. Actually, and then because we live in a town with a university and college, it does give an opportunity for Mrs. Strutt to be included, and just with the neighbors being the university, if you can kind of keep her in the loop on the research that's going on. She's the only one that really was asking, and so it's just one person. Just every once in a while, keep her in the loop. Here's what we're doing. And if this was just a resident coming to ask, I got to admit, I'd be a little more hesitant. But like when you have a full-time apiarist and you have researchers, it's kind of interesting. And if it's going south, they'll pull the plug, I'm sure. But I'd like to know. I think it's all right. And if they, left to their own devices, talk to Mrs. Strutt and say, we'll keep you in the loop, that's good. It's public service. So hopefully, we do all hope that it works out well.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment? Not seeing any. We'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So back to the motion as amended. Any further discussion or other comments? Before I call the question, I would like to just sort of round out some of the feedback. Again, I think the university has done very thorough and thoughtful job. On the other hand, our process does invite out and include our community. Sometimes we don't get any, sometimes we get one or two. And tonight we had an excellent presentation by Mrs. Strutt that's got concerns. The council's trying to take that into account. I think, to Mrs. Strutt, I think that, well, you're correct. We're not going to have any control over the bees go. We can be a little bit feeling better that we've got a very credible and solid institution that is our very first one. Like if we're going to be considering this as a pilot project, there's not much better organizations that we could have as our first applicant, who we know will they're very collaborative with us on many things, and that we can work with to ensure that this is a good fit for our community. So I think Mrs. Strutt's input to this process has been valuable to come up with a good compromise that we can kind of test out this bee thing while at the same time keeping some kind of guardrails around it so that our community is not negatively impacted. So it's been a good process. Are we ready for the question on the main motion as amended? I believe we are. Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So thank you to everybody for your part in this discussion, and we'll see where it goes. Yeah, thank you. Okay, next item, Madam Clerk.
It's the order of committee reports, Your Worship, and we have a report from the Age Friendly Committee.
And Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I actually have two reports. The one part of the report is the more formal request where I'm making a recommendation, and then the next one will be just a committee report on our last meeting. So I guess I'll start with first the report that was provided to Council, and just to explain that on March 17th, the Age Friendly Committee met, and we engaged in a strategic planning session, and we also reviewed our terms of reference on how we do things, and to that end, you've seen before you the terms of reference, and there isn't a lot of major changes to the terms. The only thing is that we updated some of the verbiage, the wording on collaboration and inclusivity. So that's more of the formal request that I'm asking of Council to adopt a recommendation to accept the updated terms of reference.
Very good. We could probably open the floor at this point to have any member of Council ask questions of Councillor Chaboyer, especially with respect to the terms of reference. They were provided to us, and it's quite straightforward, and I'm always happy to see groups keeping things up to date and tidied up, so that's a good piece of work there. So any questions of Councillor Chaboyer on the report, particularly the terms of reference? Okay, not seeing any. Very good. Was that the end of the report? Was there anything else to report? Or?
Well, I also have the informal part where I'd like to talk about our last meeting.
We should receive the formal report and adopt the recommendation, and then Councillor Chaboyer can give her informal.
The rest of the report? Okay. All right, then we'll take a motion to receive the report. Although then are we not going to have to receive it again if she gives another part of her report? All right.
She wants to give her informal part now, but and then we can include it all.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So Terry on.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Age Friendly Committee of Council met on May 19th, and first I'd like to tell you about welcome our new Age Friendly Committee member was Rob Lavin, and Rob is the Executive Director of Seniors for Seniors, so he's a great asset to add to our committee. Also, I wanted to bring awareness to, of course you're aware on Thursday we're meeting with you to sign a proclamation and make the public aware that on June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and so I think that the public should be aware of the importance of this day. Abuse and neglect of older persons is a concern throughout the world, and the UN International Plan of Action proclaims this day to recognize elder abuse as a public health and a human right issue. Communities and governments need to work collectively to prevent violence of older adults in their homes and in their communities. Ageism and social isolation is a major cause of elder abuse. One senior abused is one too many. The stats from the World Health Organization states 1 in 2 people are prejudiced against older people, so that's a shocking number for all of us to hear. Canadian Report on Ageism states 1 in 5 Canadians say older people are a burden. Older adults deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, and they are a respected member of our society. They have a wealth of experience and wisdom to share with us all. And so on June 15th, I hope that the community will take part in understanding the importance of this day, and that we move forward as a community to understand the seriousness of this problem, and that we all recognize as an age-friendly city that we want all ages to be respected in our community. So that's on June 15th, and we'll be asking you to sign a proclamation with us.
We're all set.
Yeah, and also in the future, the Age Friendly Committee will be sharing with our strategic action plan, which is part of the second part of our exercise when we went through the terms of reference. So that'll be coming up in the future. But I would like to highlight one thing that we are going to be doing now, collaborating with the city, and we are going to take part in the city plan, where they want to hear from all citizens in the city. And in this particular case, we're collaborating not only with the city but also with Seniors for Seniors, and they're just working out the details on it. There'll be more information coming out on that, and they're going to be looking at focus topics, for example, on housing, transportation, environment, food security, and we're hoping that older adults will be engaged and join in these sessions. So that's coming up shortly, and the city and Seniors for Seniors will provide more information on that. So anyways, that's just a bit of an update from our committee, and the next time I present, probably you'll hear more about our strategic action plan and the plans for what older adults would like to see in the city moving forward. Just in closing, I'd like to say that we've met with quite a few of the directors in the city and management, and we're trying to kind of make our mark that, how we make a city friendly for all ages, and to understand terms like older adults and not seniors, and get rid of the derogatory comments. And so that's one way of even getting your head around that we're not into elder abuse, that, they're an important part of society and our community, and we're going to make sure that this city is on the right page for older adults.
Very good. Thank you very much for all of that and all of the efforts of the Age Friendly Committee. So we'll open up questions of Councillor Chaboyer about the rest of the report, after which we'll take a motion to receive the report, and then we'll adopt the changes to the terms of reference. So any questions of Councillor Chaboyer on some of those activities of Age Friendly? Not seeing any. Okay, a motion to receive that report would be in order. Councillor Chaboyer.
I move that the report from the Age Friendly Committee dated May 31st, 2022 be received.
Seconder, please. Councillor Desjardins. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And a report on the adoption would be good. Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you. Actually, I'll defer to Councillor Cullen because he's on the committee with me as well, so it'd probably be good to have him.
Yep, thank you. I'd like to move that the terms of reference be adopted by the City of Brandon.
Seconder, please. Councillor Desjardins. Mover wish to speak?
No, thank you.
Any discussion? Again, I think that, as I say, it's good to see these terms of reference guidelines tidied up once in a while, so I commend the Age-Friendly Committee for staying on top of that, so that's good. Let's call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. And next item,
I believe we have a verbal report from the Keystone Center, Your Worship.
Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Keystone Center Board of Directors met May 26th. We welcomed our 2 new members of the Board of Directors and provincial appointees, Spencer Day and Katie Kirkowicz. The board was provided with an update on the first 2 concerts post-COVID, including ZZ Top and Dallas Smith rehearsals and tour kickoff concert. Poor sales, but operationally concerts went well. Planning continues for the Professional Bull Riders June 18th and pacing close to a sellout. I mention those because as we move to full reopening and toward pre-pandemic staffing levels, we're concerned with the trend of the slow uptake on events as public apprehension to large group gatherings continues to a certain degree. I know I've mentioned this a few times during the pandemic. One of the bigger challenges that will face the Keystone Center is the need to be fully operational from an expense standpoint, but revenues will be lower from an event revenue standpoint due to this factor and others. And I think this is kind of the start of those times. Just a couple of notes. Due to lack of demand for ice bookings in June and July, the ice has been pulled and we'll be attempting to repurpose the space for the summer months. ICIP-funded East Ramp parking lot repaving project has completed the engineering review, core sampling, and sewer pipe scoping without identifying any concerns, and that project should go out to tender soon. A couple other capital projects identified to move forward soon include the installation of new video surveillance system and arena handrail projects. We're given updates on financials up to the end of March. We're currently in a surplus position of about $265,000. This is a slowest portion of the year for the Keystone Center, so that is expected to be significantly impacted as we move toward our year end at the end of July. We also, as a board, approved the new transparency policy and the terms of reference for our Finance and Administrative Affairs Committee. And I also want to just remind that the Manitoba Summer Fair makes its return to the Keystone Center ground for the first time in 3 years later this week.
Very good. Good, great report. We'll open up the floor to questions with Councillor Lupke or possibly even Councillor Parker, who also sits on the board. Looks like the gentlemen are off the hook for now. Those are the committee reports we're aware of, but sometimes there are other committees that have met and reports would like to be given. We'd be happy to take those now. Not seeing any others, then we would take a motion to accept the Keystone verbal report. Moved by Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Lupke. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And next item, please.
The order of inquiries, Your Worship.
Got a number of inquiries this evening. Could probably lead off by Councillor Lupke, if you'd like.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. It did have an inquiry regarding intersection controls and yield or stop signs. I know there's been some outstanding inquiries regarding intersection controls in Brandon. We did receive one for my ward as well since our last meeting. And specifically some of the inquiries about changing intersections from being controlled by yield signs to being more controlled by stop signs. And I was just wondering if we could get an update on the status of administration's report on this matter for council.
Very good. So our city manager, Ron Bowles, does have a response ready for us. So go ahead, please.
Absolutely, and through your worship to Councillor Lupke, we have a bit of a visual response today. So I'll start off. This response is provided by Sam Van Housen, Traffic and Transportation Planner. Further to Councillor Lupke's inquiry seeking an update on administration's report on the intersection controls for our local street network, engineering department has the following response. And we're going to start off with a video. I think Councillor Lupke actually provided this video. It's 2 minutes, but it's 2 minutes worth of your time, and you'll understand stop signs and yield sign engineering.
There is no sound, by the way.
Okay. This isn't supposed to have sound.
Question is, which one is a yield and which is a stop sign?
prizes for guessing.
Bottom vehicles, Councillor Lukey driving.
Thank you. That wasn't a trick question, and there, you're right, Councillor. There's no prize. I think you provided that, so thank you very much. But Mr. Van Housen goes on to explain, so I'll continue on here. The video you just watched comes from the city of Crystal in Minnesota. A study was done on driver behavior that was observed at two similar intersections, where one was signed a yield sign and one was a stop sign. As you can see, the behavior of motorists is similar at both intersections. So when collisions occur at intersections, the city often assesses if there was another environmental condition that factor into the collision and we mitigate it as necessary. Where there is none present, law enforcement and MPI, of course, determines the fault accordingly. So the city locates yield signs. So for minor streets with low traffic volume, grid network, allowing the traffic to continually flow while giving priority to vehicles on the higher volume street. So typically, when the decision, typically the decision is whether the roadway is clear, clear it can be made, or decisions can be made at 15 kilometers or higher. Then a yield sign is most appropriate. Whereas decisions below 15 kilometers an hour, then we put in a stop sign. So it's at 15 kilometer an hour threshold, so where it's safe to make a decision. The option to replace a yield sign with a stop sign is also available under specific criteria, including collision frequency, traffic volume, sightline obstructions, on-street parking, other physical factors that prevent the safe operation of the intersection. So, to your question, Councillor Lupke, the intersection of 11th Street and Van Horn Avenue recently saw two vehicle collisions where the drivers proceeded south on 11th Street, failed to yield to the right-of-way, and collided with an eastbound traffic motorist. In both instances, it was determined that there were no environmental factors that would have contributed to the failure to yield the right-of-way. Given that the behavior of the motorists where a yield sign were warranted is the same as a stop sign, the engineering department will maintain this intersection as a yield and continue to monitor this and other intersections, of course, to confirm the most appropriate method of traffic control is being utilized. Thank you for the question.
Okay, that covered that?
I kind of answered my own inquiry, I guess, in some ways. But I know Councillor Cameron did have another intersection in his ward, kind of have a similar discussion. And I think part of that, sorry if I'm going to go on a little bit, part of the research Samuels provided to me, if I can speak a little bit for him, was there actually was a study done in a suburb of Montreal where it showed that vehicles approaching an intersection with a yield sign and stop sign, they actually cars slow down more for the yield sign than they do for a stop sign. So I thought it's interesting because I think sometimes residents feel that the stop sign is the solution, and sometimes it's not necessarily. Having said that, I think when we do get some of these questions, it's incumbent of us to see if it is an intersection that needs to be changed. So,
okay, very good. Thanks. That was unlike we just get an answer. This was a little bit of a
visual
lesson.
Got to be visual learners too.
Right. Thank you very much. And Councillor Parker, did you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you. There's so much talk this spring about lousy weather and worse road conditions. I'm just wondering if we can get an explanation for the public as to why we have to wait so long in spring to get at it. I think mostly everybody in this room would know the answer to that, but it seems to be a hot topic of conversation. And so if we could provide a bit of an explanation as to why we have to wait this long to get at it, and if it was worse this year. And I think we'd all also agree that the roads were pretty deplorable within the city this year, and not quite Winnipeg deplorable, but they were bad. So if we could get a bit of an explanation as to why it takes so long to get at them in the spring.
Okay, again, Mr. Bowles has a response ready for us. So.
Through Mayor Kress to Councillor Parker, you're correct. This is a timely question. So this answer was provided by Pam Richardson, your Director of Engineering. And she goes on to say, road maintenance continues to be a challenge for the City of Brandon this spring. Road surface maintenance cannot be adequately performed in the spring of each year until the frost has left the ground and the subsurface has had sufficient time to dry. The subsurface of the road is at its weakest point in the spring due to the high ground moisture that can be the result of a spring thaw, late spring snowfalls, and or spring rains. This year, City of Brandon has recognized all three of these contributing factors, delaying many street maintenance activities. As temperature warms up and the rain subsides, Public Works will be able to perform their annual street maintenance program, including potholing, patching, crack filling, and backlane grading. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Can I just follow up quickly? Can I just, and maybe we can ask and we can be informed, and two things. One, it would be nice if we came out ahead of it a little earlier in the spring and reminded people. I know this question probably comes up every year. But the second part is, when we have a brutal snowstorm or several brutal snowstorms, we up the ante and we put more people out and we get more equipment and more machines. Can we do that? Is there a step-up process we can have to sort of make up some of the lost times? Well, I'm wondering, and we probably don't have an answer tonight, but if we can, is that something we could look at to shorten the time frame?
Answer a little bit of that. And on the communication question, absolutely. Trying to get out even more ahead of it, especially when we have a tough year as we've had, as tough a year as we've had this year. Now, as far as the maintenance, getting ahead of the maintenance, of course, we can go do what's called cold patching, but it doesn't work that well, especially when it's still frost is still in the ground. So cold patches often get lifted right out. We have to wait for the asphalt plants to be started up, and again, they're sort of up against the same environmental constraints that the city is. So when we don't have hot asphalt to put in the holes, that part of the maintenance is we do struggle on. However, your question your next question would be, well, when the asphalt plants are open, can we get a lot of crews on the road? And that's what we're working on. I don't know if Mr. Pulak has anything to add to that.
All I'll add is one of the things that we are struggling with is with resources, the actual staff. We've had difficulty in putting together and hiring people to put crews together to do that patching. That said, we are making a greater effort to get that out, especially last week the asphalt plant has opened up, and now we're starting to get that real asphalt up. We're certainly working on that. But I hear what you're saying. We're about to do a debrief on all of the work we've been doing this spring and winter, and what's working, what's not. Communication obviously is part of that. So, absolutely.
Thanks for that. And Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two inquiries this evening, if I may. The first one, I was contacted by residents recently with regards to drainage concerns along the back lane between 26th and 25th Street, heading north from Victoria Avenue. During times of moderate rains, the slope of the lane causes rainwater to drain and fill backyards along the east side of the lane, which is impacting residents in the 400 block of 25th Street predominantly. I'm wondering if engineering or operations could examine the lane, the storm drain off of Victoria, and the grade or quality of the lane itself to potentially find solutions to help residents from having even moderate rainwater flood basements in the 400 block of 25th.
Thank you. And again, Mr. Bowles has a response ready for us.
Through Mayor Crest to Councillor Cameron, this is a long-winded take under advisement response. So it's provided by Mark Allard, your Director of Engineering, using our LiDAR, so that's laser imaging, detecting and ranging data. It appears elevations are extremely flat in the back lane from the residents of 432 25th Street north to Louise Avenue. A catch basin exists at 404 25th Street draining into the storm sewer from Louise. So some of it has some drain, but it sounds like it's pretty flat. So engineering services will be undertaking further investigation to determine what options may be available and reduce the risk of flooding of the area residents. So we'll be getting back to you with a more detailed response. Accordingly, I happen to know this back lane because it's my back lane and there is little spots on it, absolutely.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to the City Manager as well. I'm sure residents will be very appreciative of the work that engineering will look at there, because it is a concern even in moderate rainfall, so I'm glad to hear that. The second one I have is a little bit of a delayed one, but it's good to ask the question anyways. So I did have contact with a couple of residents noting that the crosswalk lights at the corner of Victoria and McDermott Avenue are not functioning when activated. I was hoping either the city or the city via contact with the province, because it is a provincial highway, could look at remedying this, as it is a safety hazard having residents feel upon pushing the button that they work when they in fact did not. So,
and again, back to Mr. Bowles. He's got a response.
Mayor Chris, again to Councillor Cameron, you're keeping Mr. Sam Van Housen, your traffic and transportation planner, busy, so he thanks you for that. Engineering did a site inspection on Friday, June the 3rd, so this last Friday, and can confirm that all the push buttons actuate the signals. Engineering would like to inform the public that there are 2 push buttons in the center meridian to actuate the preceding lanes of Victoria Avenue. Residents should depress the button that has the arrow pointing in the direction intended to travel. The buttons are angled towards the user of the crosswalk in such a manner that the closest button is to the one that the resident should depress. Engineering wishes to remind pedestrians and motorists to make eye contact with one another before entering a crosswalk. The crosswalk enhancements are presented to alert motorists of activated crosswalk, but eye contact will ensure all involved and help create the safest crossing scenario for all road users. So it sounds like the crosswalks are functioning.
Perfect.
As planned.
Thank you, through your worship. I'm glad to hear that. I know I did go down myself and there were some issues, so it could have been rectified from that point, and that's a really good point as well, to ensure that pedestrians make eye contact with the motorists, especially young children, because they're quite often not at a height that they can make the same level of eye contact. So just some good information from Sam as well with regards to that. So much appreciated.
Thank you. Those are the inquiries we're aware of, but sometimes others arise during the day, and so we'll be glad to take those now. Councillor Frangi.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I have a similar inquiry to the one of Glenn Parker. This inquiry comes after many phone calls from residents about backland grading and graveling. Why is it taking so long? Why is it taking the city so long to grade and gravel backland streets? I sent out an email May 24, but I think residents deserve to be informed on a timely manner on any delay to the services.
Well,
out there to residents nervous when they see that. These are brand new culverts, and if we're not doing the maintenance to keep that ditch in that area clean, we've wasted our money, quite frankly. So I'm just curious as to when that report's going to come back, and in the meantime, are we going to be doing a regular weekly inspection like we were doing before to make sure that type of thing isn't happening, and then dealing with it right away? The city crews were great. When I sent the message in to Paul Ziesman and to Patrick, they were out the next day, they got it cleaned out, which was great, but this is an ongoing problem with that ditch, and we've got to keep an eye on it on a weekly basis, or it's going to catch us one of these days. That's going to be a problem. So again, this is all part of what I was hoping to get back. I thought I was getting it back tonight, I guess.
You don't know the status of that?
No, we'll have to look into it. I didn't know that there was that I believe we had a solution for the Willow Point ditch, but what I'm going to suggest to council is there's probably a larger discussion just on our drainage in general. It is that season, and so what I can promise council is maybe a more holistic report back on sort of just reminding everybody what we are doing for all the ditches. This being a very important one because of the problems we had in the past, and then the blockages with garbage getting into the ditch, and the pictures you sent, so thank you.
And follow up, Your Worship, I appreciate that, but specifically I had requests on this ditch. The dredging was one, and the other maintenance was the report that we got back last time that I kind of disagreed with, what we were doing with the funds. So I was supposed to have something else come back as to what we're going to be doing, and a little bit more comprehensive. And again, I'm not saying, okay, where is it, what's going on, but I would like to see something, because this is just, that ditch situation, you know, putting the new culverts in was only part of the solution. If we don't take care of the other two steps, we're really defeating the whole purpose of it. And that's what I'm really trying to follow up on, to make sure we're keeping on top of that, because again, it's already happened with the new culverts, where the one culvert was almost totally blocked. And I know you've seen the picture, so it wasn't a pretty sight. Yeah. So,
and then just to clarify what Councillor Berry has asked, like I thought they were preparing a report on this Willowdale ditch. I don't know that we've seen it.
I don't believe that there's a report pending, but there is an update. So I've heard two things. The council wants an update on the dredging, so we can provide that, right? And then we can also give you an update on the maintenance, which is the two things that I'm hearing you ask for.
It was all supposed to be all part of this report that I was told was going to be coming, so that's just what I'm inquiring about. So,
okay,
we'll make it so. Thank you.
Other inquiries? That seems to have been covered. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
The order of announcements, Your Worship.
Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, through Your Worship. I'm announcing a Ward 2 meeting on Tuesday, June 28th at 6:30. Location, the Park Community Center. Hopefully we'll have it outdoors, weather permitting, but we can go indoors for less than 40 if we end up with some rain. And we'll be looking at an update on the Downtown Task Force, the Park Community Center, the Outdoor Sports Complex, the Library Conceptual Design, the summer events that are happening throughout the city, an update on Truth and Reconciliation Week, other city and ward issues, and hopefully some time for a question and answer period at the end. And I encourage residents from the ward who are going to attend to bring their own seating for the outdoor meeting.
Very good. And reiterate, that was June 28th, right?
June 28th, 6:30, Park Community Center.
Very good. Thank you. And Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've had an opportunity to attend a couple of the city plan events, and I know residents have been engaged at those. There's another one tomorrow night, but if you missed out on kind of the more formal city plan events, there is the city plan celebration event coming up this Saturday at Princess Park. It goes from 11 to 2. There'll be some family-friendly games and activities, live music, local food trucks, etc. And if it happens to rain, it will be moved to the Cultural Resource Center at 638 Princess Avenue. But it's a good opportunity for those residents that haven't had an opportunity to provide input into the 2050 city plan to do so at that point. And I would note that just the information coming from staff is they're looking perhaps for a little bit more input from that kind of 25 to 40 age demographic. So this seems like a perfect event for that demographic with children to come in and provide some input. Particularly the themes this Saturday will be inclusive neighborhoods, transportation, and climate change.
Thank you. And Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is more sort of a recognition, but through Your Worship, I did have the opportunity to meet with the Girl Guides of Canada Crocus West area group last week. Girl Guides group local to the Valley View neighborhood and made up of students from throughout the region, but they do meet at Valley View Community Center. Their questions range from what does it take to be a city councillor, to skills needed for the job, green initiatives, addiction issues in the city. And the best part of all is at the end they shared two things that they really liked about living in the city and one thing that they'd like to change. And one thing that was very positive that come out of it was our network of paths throughout the city are very positive. So knowing Carla Paddock, who is the organizer of this group, there may potentially be a test if any of them are watching tonight. So I just want to say though that I appreciated the opportunity to engage with young people about what's important to them in the community as well. So just wanted to make recognition of that.
Much. Thanks for attending that. Councillor Spoye.
Thank you, Worship. On your behalf and council, I attended the official opening of a new vegetable garden and a patio area at Seniors for Seniors on June 1. And it's just an incredible gathering place that they've created, for older adults, and they keep on growing. And so I was quite proud to do that, for you. And they receive funding from the Building Sustainable Communities program from the provincial government, so they wanted to have this grand opening and ribbon cutting ceremony. And it was also a launch for, also they had a barbecue at lunchtime to recognize their volunteers. And the big event that's happening this year is their 40th anniversary. So these two events were to kind of kickstart the launch of their 40th anniversary. And so I also had to tour their facility and all the events that they host. There's yoga, there's dancing, there's card playing, all kinds of stuff. And then they prepare, it could be up to 500 meals a week for the community. So it's incredible how much is happening at that organization. And I walked out on your behalf with a certificate of appreciation. This certificate is awarded to the City of Brandon in recognition for your valuable contribution as a partner with the Brandon Seniors for Seniors Co-op Incorporated. So anyways, I will present it to you for the city.
Thank you very much. Well, we can learn what we can do in the many years ahead when we become seniors, Councillor Chaboy. So
absolutely. I told them that we're members of the club, so.
Okay, I didn't see any other hands up. Councillor Desjarlais, go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. Very quickly want to congratulate the city and the partners who put together the event to celebrate Arbor Day at the Keystone Center. And I want to single out particularly two City of Brandon staff, Brady Dane, the Recreation Coordinator for Parks and Rec, and Stephen Clark, who I think is an arborist. I spent a lot of time with both the individuals. Brady was like a great ambassador for the city, talking about all the different events that we've got going this summer. He was infectious and he had me smiling, and he didn't know I was a city councillor, so that was the best part of it. And Stephen Clark was helping educate our community on tree planting, on our canopy, emerald ash borer and Dutch elm disease, and showed some folks how to plant trees, and they did a plant of a maple and in the heritage forest there at the Keystone. And then they also had a bunch of trees that had signs so you knew which kind of tree they were, so white spruce, so on and so forth. So it was super informative. Kudos to the city and again the partners who pulled that off, and hopefully we can do that again in the near future. But great to meet Brady and Stephen, and they did a fantastic job this weekend.
Good to hear. Any others? I'll say that kind of an overarching theme of some of the announcements tonight is a very encouraging sign in our community, and I know and I appreciate that many councillors have had to attend on our behalf on things that the mayor is perhaps invited to, and we've had to assign out a lot of activities. So like the activities and events have just exploded, which is just delightful to see. We were certainly, our community starved for that for practically 2 years, so they're coming with the great abundance at the moment, which is just delightful to see, to the extent that I can't possibly get to them all at the same time, and so you can see that almost all the councillors have had to pick up some of these events again, which is just great. So we congratulate all of these organizations that are putting their things back on their feet after 2 years of hiatus, and really that's what our community is about. So really appreciate seeing that. A couple I'd like to mention. One of the reasons that some of these had to get covered off, the annual Federation of Canadian Municipalities National Conference was held this past end of last week and this weekend in Regina, Saskatchewan, and the delegates this year from our council were Councillors Frangi and Lupke and myself. Again, Regina did an excellent job, despite the rivalries we have with Regina from time to time, but they did a great job of hosting, and some of the things that workshops and study tours that we would have attended centered around housing is certainly a big topic, reconciliation, economic innovation, climate change, including then infrastructure resiliency. There were political keynote addresses from most every national political leader, including the Prime Minister. A lot of networking, of course, so those are, I think pretty much every councillor has attended an FCM or 2 or 3 in their time with council, and they're very valuable, and certainly it's good that Brandon is always represented at these, and it was a good one. And then I want to tail off by reminding people, as I promised that I would do, about our impending election. This coming Wednesday is 20 weeks away, so it's starting to kind of get closer, and we will have elections for school trustees for our school board, for city councillors, and for the mayor's seat. You're capable of registering as a candidate for mayor already. I believe that started May 30th, and you can start to register as a candidate for city councillor June 30th. Is that right, Madam Clerk? And is trustee the same?
Trustees do not have to pre-register, so they do not make any submission till nominations.
Okay. So then the nomination period will show up in September. But, you know, these are very important positions, important to our community, and important considerations for people to make. So it's certainly high time that people are starting to take an interest in all 3 of these positions, if you will. 20 weeks will go by fast, especially in the summer. So I think everybody around this table would attest to how rewarding the work is. Very interesting to be involved in your community in this way, and I would highly encourage people to strongly considering for running for any one of these positions. And I know any councillor around this table, I'm sure school trustees as well, would be more than happy to talk to anybody and kind of pass on, what it entails. And there's certainly information packages or online available through our clerk's department, I'm sure the school board as well. So promise you're going to get sick of hearing me say that, but we're really want to get as much engagement in these elections moving forward as we can. So if there were no other announcements, I believe we can move on to the next item, please.
Under the order of general business, Your Worship, we have a request for a motion regarding disaster financial assistance.
Very good. I'm not sure, we weren't having a presentation by anybody on that. It's kind of fairly straightforward, kind of practically a housekeeping matter. So if somebody would like to propose that, Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you, through Your Worship. Whereas the City of Brandon has realized preemptive actions, responses, and recovery costs for the 2022 spring flooding event, and whereas the provincial government has announced a disaster financial assistance program regarding the 2020 spring flood event, therefore it be resolved that the City of Brandon respectfully requests the province to participate in the program, the public sector, as it has incurred expenses as a result of this event. And further be it resolved that the City of Brandon, on behalf of their residents, also respectfully requests the province to participate in the program, private sector, in the event that residents incurred financial costs relating to the 2022 spring flood event.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Parker. Whoever wishes to speak?
Yeah, thank you, through Your Worship. This is something that when we do have situations like we did, of course, others in the area in the province had some worse situations than we did this year, but in the case of just the city of Brandon here, we do the impact assessment we have includes all our preemptive actions, so the preparing of sandbags, pumping operations at multiple locations that are at high risk, the virtual activation of the emergency response control group, the river level monitoring, and then even things such as Wheat City Golf Course, Dinsdale Park, Queen Elizabeth Park, Fat Bike Trail, Red Willow Pathway continue to be impact. So we'll assess those things as they go down, and it is an application that will go in, and that residents also can go through this process as well. So that I believe they would be able to contact the clerk's office to send them in the right direction. So it is just that the request for disaster financial assistance. Yeah.
Yes, and again, in years of high water, other natural calamities, and we routinely must pass a motion to authorize this to take place, which certainly allows the City of Brandon itself to apply, but also then allows any of our residents that may have suffered any loss or damage to also apply. So that kind of gets that ball rolling or open up that opportunity. Any further discussion? Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
Consideration of the application to subdivide 21 Willowcrest Avenue.
And again, we've got Mr. Nickel. We're going to challenge his challenged voice. We're making him speak many times, but he's coming along pretty good.
Yeah, through Your Worship to Council, Todd challenged me to read the entire recommendation for you verbatim, so here goes. Kidding aside, we are working on development agreement parameters, so part of that will be to adopt standards for conditions, and the hope is that the recommendations are going to be shorter at some point in time. I mean, conditions are important, but probably not all of them have to be included. But this is a fairly complicated site, so that is why there's lots of conditions associated with it. I'm sure Council recalls some of the history on this site. We've been through multiple public hearings. At one time it was one big site together, then it got split apart, and then a concept changed on one side, and then the concept changed on the other side, and now the concept's changing again on the north side. So I hope this is the final change of any concept and the site is finished. And from the feedback we've received from residents, I think that's the hope of the feedback of residents as well. So if you're looking at your agenda package, there's one page labeled B3, and that has the new concept. What are the details of the new concept and why is the subdivision moving forward? The subdivision is to create 2 lots in a public road. The one lot will be where those existing row houses are, if you can visualize the site. But no road's been built to them. So that will be finished up with an 18-unit building and those row houses, and that will be one lot. The Willowcrest stub that goes into that will become a public road because from subdivision legislation, you need a public road to get to a lot. So that's why we're going to end up taking this stub on. Lot 2 is that larger stub, and that'll be developed for 160 units or so, 166 units multi-development. From a staffing perspective, we were fairly pleased because part of the benefit of it, it'll be able to be incorporated with the existing site to the north. So it'll become, for all intents and purposes, from how people will view it as one site. The biggest change there is that, if council recalls, there was a big community discussion about the Kelsey emergency access when we went through this originally. We went through multiple meetings and all sorts of options, and it's no longer needed. So that's one of the benefit of doing the sites together, because there'll just be an access agreement between the 2 parties, and it'll just flow through the site rather nicely. So I think that's a benefit. When there was engagement done by the applicants on this process, we received lots of phone calls. I thought we'd have a really busy public hearing, and there was one letter of opposition received citing traffic concerns. Not that traffic isn't a concern. We've received that concern from many residents. One of the added benefits of this request will be that traffic will be able to flow to Lyndale directly because it connects through and out to Sycamore. So there's going to be multiple options. So from a traffic perspective, I think certainly there's going to be more units, but also more options to balance that out. In terms of the buffer and the fencing, there was a public reserve buffer as part of previous proposals. It remains there. Residents were looking to have it cleaned up. Those are still conditions that will need to be landscaped by the developers with appropriate buffer trees, and it will also be maintained by the developers. And there will be a new fence constructed along the residents' property lines to provide some separation. From a building perspective, if council wants to kind of put into context, it'll be much similar to what we already see to the north. So larger 4-story buildings being built on that site, along with surface parking. And the applicants worked with the planning department on the design, including access for transportations and green spaces. You can see by the design there's ways to walk within the site, and the green space will be connected with the existing green space to the north, hopefully to provide a good quality of life for those who live there. The conditions, there's a lot of them. Many of them are fairly standard. The big pieces we're going to be taking on Willowcrest Avenue, so there needs to be some assessments done. Outside of that, we're going to get some development charges and different conditions related to stormwater management. If council recalls, part of the approach of that first development was they were storing stormwater in the parking lot. So that'll be a continuation of this design and that the stormwater system will also connect to that one. So there's all sorts of benefits to these sites being developed together, and we were pleased to see that was the approach. So if there's any kind of questions from council, I'll be here to answer them. Thanks.
You're good. Thank you very much, Mr. Nicol. Yeah, this certainly has been around and around, and good to see. Hopefully it's coming to a head here. So Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship, to Mr. Nicol. So there is the 2 entrance and exits. Sorry, is there sort of a shared crossing over properties? Like, it's an agreement that it'll be written in? That's just, we have that in some other places, yeah. But that's what it is. Just it'll be 2 different properties with the agreements. And then also we're closing that. What happens to we had, is it Tracy Street? That we had that piece of property on Tracy Street that was used as a. So you say it's closed and can be resold, or?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Fawcett. Are you talking about the lot that was acquired for the emergency
Yes.
access?
Yes.
Yeah, the mobile modular home is there, and it will just remain.
Just remains there.
It'll
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
it'll just be there like it always was.
Yeah, so this is cleaner.
It's a way cleaner, yep.
And looking at the plan, looking at the developers and such, it should actually finish that development, which we'll see.
Okay, thank you. Other questions of Mr. Nickel? Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Nickel. Obviously, with increasing the number of units in this area once again, you have a level of comfort in the capacity both for supplying services to it and also the storm water capacity. Obviously, we know that this area is an area of the city that's already impacted by challenges with high water events. Just wondering your thoughts on this and what sort of impact it would have on that.
Yeah, through your worship, Councillor Cameron. So starting with the storm water, as is typical for developments in this area, they have to store water on their properties. So that's part of the design because we know of the challenges in the area, and that was part of that initial phase, and that will be the same as part of this phase. So it certainly will not fix our drainage problem, but it shouldn't make it any worse. From the discussion about wastewater and water, the density is not increasing on this site. So the flows from what was previously approved through the rezoning, which happened almost a long time ago now, almost eight years, the flows from this are not increasing, and that was, we ensured we communicated that through the process.
Perfect. No, I thank you for that. I just wanted those confirmations that aspect hadn't changed. So thank you.
And any other questions, Mr. Nickel? It's covered. Thank you, Ryan. A motion would be in order, please. I guess it's probably Councillor Brown's ward, so anybody? Councillor Lupke, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the application to subdivide the property at 21 Willowcrest Avenue, parcels AB Plan 1269 BLTO, parcels 1-2 Plan 1287 BLTO, parcel B Plan 1547 BLTO, parcel 1 Plan 1592 BLTO be approved to create one lot in a public road in a residential high-density zone subject to the owner or successor. The second part, entering into a development agreement with the City of Brandon to be registered in a series with the subdivision with the conditions as listed.
You. And then maybe picking up on page 7, it says, and that the administration be authorized. Is that what you like, Madam
Yes,
Clerk?
please. Thank you.
After condition X, pick up from there.
I have to find that. Sorry, Your Worship.
It'll be a lot of scrolling. Right after X, it says, and that administration be prepared to.
Bottom of X.
And that administration be authorized to prepare a development agreement containing all conditions and requirements to protect the city's interests in accordance with any procedures, policies, bylaws, and acts.
And then
Submitting written confirmation to the City of Brandon Planning and Buildings Department that arrangements have been made for postal service to the satisfaction of Canada Post. Providing written confirmation to the City of Brandon Planning and Buildings Department that taxes for the property to be subdivided for the current year plus any penalty, interest, and arrears have been paid in full or arrangements must be made satisfactory to Brandon City Council. And submitting written confirmation to the City of Brandon Planning and Buildings Department that arrangements have been made for a joint use easement agreement and plan of easement to the satisfaction of Manitoba Hydro, Bell MTS, and Westman Communications Group, and registering the easement agreement along with the easement plan if required in series with the plan of subdivision.
Thank you. It's seconded by Councillor Parker. Thank you for doing that, Councillor Lupke. And open it for discussion. It's been a long, complicated, be worthwhile certainly when it's finished. Any questions or comments? I had one technical question I should ask Brian when he was up here. Had we had just 3 more conditions, because we got to X, Y and Z, what would have happened to that next condition? What would we have numbered it at after Z?
AA, then you go AA.
Okay.
AABB.
We've been there.
And hopefully we won't have to go there. Okay, sounds like we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
As per Councillor Lubke's notice of motion at the last meeting, we have a report regarding the residential parking permit program.
Councillor Lubke?
Just go ahead with the resolution. Okay. Whereas the City of Brandon and the City Council endeavor to update bylaws based on the needs of its residents, and whereas the global pandemic has changed many ways in which business is conducted, including the increased ability for employees to work from home, and whereas residents should be encouraged to use other modes of transportation to travel to and from workplaces, and whereas the City Council strategic plan has an overarching theme of environment and climate change, now be it resolved that the Traffic Authority Advisory Committee evaluate the need for extending the 48-hour parking prohibition through a residential parking permit program, and further that the Traffic Authority Advisory Committee determine what time limit would be acceptable and the criteria a resident would need to qualify for a residential parking permit that allows a resident to park on the street for more than 48 hours.
And a seconder, please. Councillor Parker, whoever wishes to speak.
I'll try to make this brief. I did submit an inquiry back in December regarding the possible expansion of the residential parking permit program to accommodate residents who were working from home due to the pandemic. And in a response to City Council, Jennifer Cooey, the Manager of Strategic Infrastructure Development Services, offered three options following an analysis of the traffic bylaw by Engineering Service. And one of those options was to have the Traffic Authority Advisory Committee evaluate the need to extend the 48-hour parking prohibition and determine what time limit would be acceptable throughout the city before amending the bylaw. So for me, part of this comes from some tickets that were written for residents that violated the 48-hour parking permit allowable time limit, but residents were working from home when it's minus 35 out for 10 days and no reason to move their vehicle. And it seems to me that perhaps there's some room for residents to be able to apply to have their vehicle parked on a street under those type of circumstances, whether it's having the ability to have proof from their employer that they're working from home or some of the other criteria. So I think for me it's important to investigate whether this bylaw should be a change to accommodate really the evolving ability for workplaces to have the option of working from home and what that means for our residents. I also wonder, and it was pointed out to me by a resident, with this 48-hour bylaw, you're actually forcing residents to drive their vehicles every 2 days. And if we're looking for opportunities for our residents to use other modes of transportation, whether it's their own public transit or other alternatives, that we should also allow them to leave their vehicles parked for longer than the 2-day program. So for me, this is a long explanation to the fact that I'm just wanting more information for our administration to investigate if there's a need in our city for this to happen, and B, if there is a need, what we can do to maybe adjust our bylaw to accommodate that need.
Very good. Discussion? I personally like the approach of this that you put together, Councillor Lubke, in terms of its, asking our administration to do further examination and possibly even check with other municipalities to see what's working. Sometimes we have laws on the books that, made sense 20, 30, 40 years ago, and, certainly times change. Gas prices are skyrocketing, and as you say, people should be encouraged to use their vehicles less, not more. I know Councillor Desjardins, I think, has brought this up. It's been a factor at numerous residents in his ward as well. And so I think there's a good approach personally. So, other discussion? We're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Consideration of a report from Fire and Emergency Services on open-air fire regulations.
Very good. So I know we have a member of the fire service here, Deputy Chief Parlow. I assume he's prepared to speak to this first, and he'll take it from there. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillors, as it has been identified, I have been asked here this evening as a result of a request from City Council and Your Worship to bring forward information and possible recommendations for potential changes. I believe you have the recommendations before you. To speak to it, I would just have to say that what we did was a review of the current bylaw, and we looked through it as it has been identified in your report. The regulation that is currently in place has been in place since 2003. Over that time period, we have issued 2,758 permits, and within the last 5 years, we have also, out of that 2,753, we have issued 1,237. Of those being issued in the last 5 years, we have seen had 83 complaints through those same 5 years. The complaints have ranged from excessive fire load, so too much wood in their firebox, creating a larger fire than what is allowed, excessive smoke, prohibited material, and fires being left unattended. In those instances, the fire was either extinguished, education was provided to the permit holder, and what we have found is once we have identified those situations, we usually don't have repeat offenses. So that's something that we have worked upon. In speaking with shift officers just recently during this review, it has been identified that they have not been seeing very many complaints even this year as a result of a lot of discussions taking place, but we have, in discussions with our officers, have not seen an increase in any complaints even this year. And in fact, some have not had any complaints on their shifts. So what we have proposed is that, further to what the history of it, in 2012, the bylaw was amended to reduce the size of the fire pit or outdoor burning appliance. At one time, it used to be larger than 75 centimeters or 30 inches. It used to be larger than that. And what we found was we wanted to reduce the size so that therefore the fires were smaller and less smoke. So that was done at that time. So that was reduced. So with regards to some of the things identified, our recommendations have been obviously identified here, was to enhanced public education, which we believe will reduce even the amount of complaints that we are receiving, although not a large amount. We believe that would actually decrease the amount of complaints. We would also identify proper use and obviously the proper burning material, because as I stated earlier, it's usually to do with the fire is too large, thereby creating more smoke, improper material being burned in the actual burning appliance, and improper use being left unattended. Those are our things. So we would like to actually key in on those even more. Approximately 2 weeks ago, we actually sent out our first public service announcement regarding fire outdoor burning appliances, and that went out to the community. So we would look at enhancing that even more so. And as identified in the report, we would also look at those areas in the city where we maybe have higher usage and go and actually pinpoint those even more so and talk about the importance of following the regulation and identifying those things that I talked about earlier. So we also spoke with municipalities and cities that we are in contact with quite a bit. There was 6 places identified, spoken to, Winnipeg, Portage, Red Deer, Saskatoon, Moose Jaw, and Regina. Out of those communities or municipalities, we found that our bylaw is similar to or more better in certain areas, whether it's the size of the box. But what we found with Saskatoon, Moose Jaw, and Regina, as we identified in the report, is that they also have restricted hours of use. In the report, you'll notice that they all have different times that they actually would like to reduce the hours. Saskatoon being from 2 to 11, that you can only use it between those hours. Regina from 12 p.m. to 1 a.m. And Moose Jaw, you can only use it between 8 a.m. and 12 a.m. So what we did was we took an approach that we would just be with 12 p.m. and 12 a.m. We are trying to be consistent, but obviously not being later than or earlier than. We just tried to pick those numbers that were reasonable. And then finally, looking at that the outdoor burning appliances would also prohibit the use of outdoor burning appliances when poor air quality advisory is issued by the province. So if we're having forest fires in the city, we wouldn't want to actually increase the amount of smoke that's in the city already. So we would look at reducing the amount of that by limiting the access or putting out those advisories to the citizens. I do believe that Lindsay Hargraves is also here through Teams, and I do believe she would possibly be able to answer any questions with regards to the environmental portion of it, but that is also contained in the document. There has been some questions about the enhanced public education component of it as well, is that we did put I guess some things in there with regards to additional considerations. So those are identified as well. So I guess, have any questions of me? I think that kind of.
Very good. It's a good report. A lot of information there and well presented. So we'll open up the floor for questions. I think Councillor Fawcett had his hand up first, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. Yeah, it's a good presentation, lots of information in there. One question I had, it was an issue we had a few years back, and I don't know if there's been a resolution because we do have a smaller pit size or box size, as you said, and sort of a lot of the stores where you purchase these things were larger than what our permits were allowing. So we had this sort of ongoing, store-bought purchase to go to get the permit and not being able to get it because the store-boughts. So have we kind of found a resolution to that, or are we aware of what's being sold as a outdoor fire piece, and are they all code that are being sold?
So through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, we have identified to local businesses that we do have this permit in place and the requirements. Fortunately, unfortunately, these stores service a large area, not just Brandon, so people can come in and buy them. But when they do notice, when they go to install them and every single fire pit needs to have a permit, we do identify to them that it does not meet and has to be corrected.
Yeah, okay.
But we do educate the businesses to let them know that I myself have seen them, but they can obviously have larger outdoor burning appliances in other parts of the province. So,
thank you, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Parlow. I didn't see it specifically here, but does this have any bearing on the propane or just wood burning?
Through your worship to Councillor Parker, this does not refer to burning with propane. That's obviously a separate issue. That is separate from this. We don't regulate the burning through propane.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and Councillor Berry, then Councillor Chaboyer.
Just one quick question to start for me. I'll have more later. But on the report here, it said 83 complaints ranging from excessive load, excessive smoke, etc. Out of those 83 complaints, how many fines did we actually issue? How many tickets were issued to people for violating those acts?
Through your worship to Councillor Berry, I don't believe there were any issued. As I said earlier, what we find is that it quickly is extinguished, or we have to quickly educate them as to how they're actually supposed to be burdened properly, and then we are not usually issuing the tickets. But I'd have to go back and check on that for sure, because it has been over the 5 years. But to my understanding, we have not issued any tickets. It's extinguished, and we don't have any complaints or issues with that homeowner in the future.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, and then Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Mr. Parlow. Of all those complaints, and you said that usually the fires are stopped or so, at what point do you just pull their permit and it's not allowed anymore? There's so many complaints from one property. Do you just keep repeatedly going back, and or is there a point where there is going to be fines and then eventually, you know, 4 strikes you're out, or 3 strikes you're out, and you're not allowed to have a fire.
Through your worship, Councillor Chaboy. So within the actual regulation itself, P30, it does have identified fines for misuse or not having a permit. So those are identified in the regulations. What we do is we try to work with all the homeowners in the area. When we do have a complaint, we do go and discuss it with the individual and the person that's making the complaint. We do identify that if we do extinguish it if it's not meeting, or we have them extinguish it, and we try to work with that individual. If it's a continual thing that we're called back a second time or a third time, we will look at fines or removing the permit so they can't do that anymore.
Thanks.
And Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, I had one question asked and answered, but I did just think of another. So through you to Mr. Parlow, was you have 2,758 burning appliance permits, but I think we all know there's probably more devices, appliances out there than what's permitted. Any idea, do you ever kick those numbers around at the department on how many unpermitted fire pits there might be in the city?
Through your worship to Councillor Lupke, no, I have not. What we do is we only go with regards to people when we're told that they have something burning or complaints or anything like that. That's the only way we would know, so I can't answer that question.
I appreciate that. And so what would happen if somebody had an unpermitted fire pit?
Once again, it would be put out. Initially, it would be put out. There always is an education component that they maybe don't realize that they have required a permit, and that's getting back to that enhanced education portion of it. But then once we identify to it, they'll usually have to apply for their permit. It'll be extinguished right away and told they cannot burn anymore. But it's obviously on a situational basis every single time.
Thank you.
Okay. I had a couple, and then back to Councillor Chaboy. You may not have this, but it was good that you did have some data. You had 83 complaints over 5 years, so that's an average of just under 17 a year. Do you have a feel for how that would stack up on the various categories? Like you said, some are for fires too big, improper wood material, excessive smoke. Any feel for how the complaints stack across those lines? You know, there's 17 a year. Are the majority of them about smoke, or the majority of them about too big a fire, or do you have a feel for that?
Yes, Your Worship. In looking at the information, there's nothing that really stands out one or the other. It's a lot to do with what the material that they're burning, and obviously the amount of smoke that's being emitted is probably obviously one of our things that we probably look at the most. But those are probably the most.
Is the position of I know that's taken into account when the permit is supplied and we kind of inspect, and it occurs to me that a lot of times the position of this fire pit is going to have a significant impact on how it will affect the neighbor. Like if my neighbor had a fire pit, if he had it over here, smoke's probably coming in my window pretty badly, and if it's over here, not so much. Was that taken into account by your people?
Through the regulation, it identifies the requirements is basically a minimum of 5 feet clearance measured from the nearest fire pit edge to any buildings, property lines, or other combustible materials. So that's basically what we use is within at least a minimum of 5 feet from within. So that's how we gauge that.
And then the last thing, of the, whatever it was, 2,785 permits, do we then keep a database of that? Because I'm just kind of thinking of this public education that we want to ramp up, you know, and we've got obviously their names, possibly emails. You know, we would have a pretty easy way of keeping in touch with people that have them. Like, it's not like trying to reach the 20,000 households. We only have to reach the people that have the fire pits.
So in our fire department management system, that is where we would collect all this data with regards to complaints and issued permits. So I could speak very clearly about the last 5 years as a result of the data is probably more accurate in the sense of it's changed over the years. So that's why it is identified more so with over the last 5 years. But yes, we do have pretty much all those permits and the information readily available if we need it.
Thank you. And back to Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I guess this question would be more for Ms. Hargraves on the educational portion of it.
Okay.
Part of the...
Lindsay's online. Here she is.
Yeah.
So,
Wait, no.
There we go.
Welcome.
thank you, Ms. Hargraves. The question I have for you, how are you educating folks on carbon reduction? You know, like I know that you look after all the environmental initiatives, and carbon reduction is incredibly important to all of us on the planet. What are you doing in regards to fire burning devices like this? What's your plan?
Through your worship to Councillor Chaboyer. So we haven't done anything about carbon reduction related to fires. That is not something the city has done before, but it has come to light and the impact that that has. The Canadian Council of Ministers of Environment have a really good document that outline different educational measures, such as like working with air quality monitors, the types of wood, times to when to burn, and then the impact, environmental impact that it will have, and health impacts that it could have on people in sensitive areas, such as seniors, nursing homes, that kind of thing, wind direction, and geographical area. So working with the fire department on educational will have that environmental lens.
Session tonight on the impact of smoke on bee population and then even on our residents and all the carcinogens involved, that it would be, I think, incredibly important for the public and especially the wood burners out there to start recognizing how it's affecting all of us in the big picture, you know, beyond their own little fire pit. They have to understand their contribution is not helping. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Jarley?
Thank you, through your worship. I'm sorry, I'm reading through the regulations, and number 18 says fires shall not be set in windy conditions conducive to creating a running fire or a nuisance to another person. What's windy conditions? Do we have speed on that wind that we say we're prohibiting fires, or are we just hoping that we're all going to come to the same consensus on what windy conditions are?
Through your worship to Councillor Desjardins. So there is obviously no set speed on that. What we would do is when we do receive those complaints, we would actually go and identify that if it's going directly, if it's a very windy day, it is in here as to identifying windy conditions. If smoke from a fire, number 19 also says if smoke from a fire causes unreasonable interference with the use and enjoyment of another person's property, that would be also taken into case, looking at the windy condition and then going into and saying, well, this is going right into their home. So that was put in there for those reasons.
Thank you, and I like that. Sorry, through your worship. I just wonder how we're going to ensure that it gets extinguished immediately, because somebody's going to have to pick up the phone and complain. Somebody's going to have to drive over there. It's probably not going to be immediately, and we certainly don't want residents dealing with that.
Right.
Resident to resident.
So that'll once again go to that enhanced education, because it's in the regulation. It is identified in the regulation, the windy conditions and causing interference to your neighbors, so that we would have to educate them as to this is how this is supposed to work. So if it is windy conditions and it is actually blowing into your neighbor's property, that you have a right to have that extinguished. So that is identified.
Yeah, like, because through your worship to the presenter, and or to, yeah, thinking about time, I'm more concerned about windy conditions and the impact that will have on residents than I am somebody getting up at 5:30, 6 in the morning and having a fire in their backyard before they go fishing that day. And there's no wind and nobody's up yet, and I'm sure that doesn't that wouldn't make you happy either, but it would be fine for me compared to somebody who's going out at 4 p.m. when it's 40 to 60 wind gusts, and us not addressing that in an immediate fashion, right? So I'm also wondering if we could consider having some type of bulletin or public notice going out that where we have bans on days when we know that it's going to be windy. Like there's just, you can check if you want to try and have a fire, you got to go to the City of Brandon website or whatever, and they'll just say fire is prohibited today because I couldn't golf. It was a 3-stroke hole here. I mean, I usually hit a fire and I'm hitting a driver here. I shouldn't be having a fire either, right?
Your Worship, to Councillor Desjardins, we're not going to talk about my golf game either. So, obviously, if that's what we would like to look at or consider, we could obviously look at perhaps something further towards what is already in there. And
I think I'm just trying to find somewhere we can find a happy medium right now, because I don't think we're going to stop anybody from wanting to have a fire pit in their backyard, but I do hear the concerns of residents who are around the carcinogens, and I do want us to provide as safe as possible environment out there for kids and children, those who might really be more susceptible to those challenges.
Probably don't want anybody burning anything in those high wind conditions, and up until now we haven't been putting out high wind advisories or anything like that because we haven't seen any complaints or any information to suggest that we needed to go there, because obviously, like we've identified, we haven't received a lot of complaints with regards to appliances, so that's why it hasn't really been an issue. But it is in there identifying that if you are being bothered by the smoke, that it out.
Okay, and Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, my question is more for the city clerk because it's a matter of procedure that I have some questions about. They can kind of clear up a lot of the stuff we're talking about, even to Councillor Desjardins' point and Deputy Chief Parlow's point. And by the way, the reason you don't get the phone calls is because I get them all. Don't worry about it. So that's why they're not coming to you. We're the ones getting them, so we're hearing about it. Yeah. Point of procedure, Madam Clerk. The recommendations being brought forth in a report, I don't know if I can change those, but I do want to amend some. In other words, I want to add some on. Okay. And what I would also like to do in the essence of time here, because it's getting late, and I think this needs a little bit more discussion and thought about what we're doing, is I'd like to know if I could put forth recommendations to be added to this and then defer the motion to the next meeting for council to have time to think about it and then maybe hear some feedback from the public as well.
Yes. You can put forward whatever motion you like. So if you want to build on the motion that has been recommended by administration, you can certainly do that. And then prior to it being voted on, it could be tabled until the next
meeting. Can be tabled after that? We don't have to vote on the amendments tonight?
No.
Okay.
You can put forward
the amendments, but then we wouldn't vote on the motion as amended.
Right.
Right, and that's what I'm getting at, because this is going to be a little bit of a lengthy debate. It's getting late. I know some of us are getting tired. I just think we need to take a little more consideration with some of the things here, and especially with some of the things I'm going to be putting forth here right away, is what I'm asking. So,
well, the other thing I like about your suggestion, and not to interrupt the city clerk, but by doing that, Councillor Berry, that putting forth some amendments, then the deferral will also give the fire service the opportunity to, because quite often we'll pass amendments and pass a motion, and our administration are like, okay, now how do we implement this thing? So I think this would be a better process, that amendments that are being considered can be also considered by our fire service in terms of their safety, applicability, and ability to enforce them and all that. So I like that. Okay, before we get to that, because it might inform any amendments or discussion, I'll try not to be long, but I did have a couple more questions of my own. One was about hours, and the other is about buffers. So first of all, hours, you obviously seriously considered that. You looked at, there's only 3 municipalities that have other hours. Presumably the others, such as Winnipeg and Red Deer, are like we've been, kind of wide open. So sort of subject to the complaints that you've received, were there any patterns, any even just not even the complaints, but the experience, I guess? You know, you guys obviously see this as much as anybody, that would help to, like, I think, try to come up with some compromise that, you know, sort of respecting that some people would like to have a fire pit, and then other people would like to have, you know, have their homes where they can have their windows open and not have any smoke come in. So trying to find a kind of times for each of them. So it's a little bit like, okay, fire time is over, good, I can open my windows again and go to bed. So any thought on that? I mean, you've obviously made a recommendation from noon to 12 midnight, but, you know, I don't know what, help us with the thoughts on that.
Yes, Your Worship. What we felt was, as a department, we just looked at the times that were currently out there from other departments in our discussions with the other departments that have those restrictions. There were some things that were identified later on the day. If it was later on the day that they'd be able to, they had a lot of groups that were coming to them having to actually apply for a permit every time that they wanted to burn at 12 noon instead of 2, and that would be similar to what Saskatoon has. I think theirs is 2 in the afternoon. So every individual that wanted to burn during those times, like the example that was given to us was Girl Scouts. They wanted to actually have a fire. Well, they'd have to actually apply for a permit every single time they wanted to do that, and so that was problematic. So that's why they brought that suggestion up, that it had to be maybe a little bit earlier than 2 so that you could do that, but that was on their experience. Later on in the evening is when we get a lot of our complaints after 11 or 12 midnight, is when we have obviously gatherings in place at homes, and that was when we usually saw the increase in improper use and improper material was late after midnight. So that's kind of where we kind of came up with that number, fair and reasonable to everybody. So
partly because there's probably other things going along with the fire that late at night that
might have played a role, yes.
And then my last question, Deputy Parlow, is about the buffers. And again, the presenter we had earlier this evening, I think, made a valid comment about contemplation of buffers, possibly even unlike the pesticides, because we do not spray pesticides when it's at all windy. So we've got a little tighter control on where that pesticide is going, and therefore those buffers can be a little more precise, whereas the smoke, and I agree with the point that the presenter made, could go for blocks and blocks on a even modestly windy night. So I don't know if you guys had discussed buffers and whether or not that really was practical at all.
Yes, Your Worship, we had considered buffers, and that's why we had identified it in the report as additional considerations. But what we did find is that we haven't had, although Councillor Barry does receive obviously a lot of complaints, we do not see a lot of complaints. So I guess we didn't see the need. The other communities that have looked at changing the hours and all that stuff had received probably a lot more complaints, especially later on in the evenings. And so that's why they went that route. But with regards to buffers, we checked with all the municipalities and communities that we touched base with, and none of them had any buffer zones. Also, when we go to a possible complaint, in discussions with some of the officers that have had to discuss those with them, is that a lot of times it's not the person right next door to them. It might be half a block down. It might be a little ways away. So they find the person. It's quite a ways away, but they're burning the wrong material. They're burning wet wood. They're burning inappropriate material, which is building construction things. So once again, it goes back to that enhanced education and dealing with those individuals in a way that they're not going to be increasing the smoke, or the fires are too large, and then we're having more smoke going throughout the community. If they were to burn seasoned wood, dry seasoned wood, we wouldn't see the amount of smoke. But unfortunately, they aren't maybe being as diligent in that. So that enhanced public education would probably play a very large role in actually reducing the amount.
Very much. Any other questions for Deputy Parlow? Councillor Jarley?
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. Just touched on something else that I was going to ask. Did you come across any municipalities that actually limited the type of wood you were allowed to burn in your backyard, right? Because there are some woods that are way smokier than others, right? Like poplar, you don't burn poplar in your backyard. It's crazy smoky, right? Or spruce, but I mean, if you burn a maple or ash or oak, I mean, those hardwoods they burn a lot cleaner, right? And so I'm just wondering if there was any bylaws out there that were limiting the type of wood that you're allowed to burn.
To Councillor Desjardins, no, we haven't. None of them identified through their bylaws anything with regards to the type of wood. It just identified that it needed to be seasoned wood and dry. So maybe it's a matter of educating people to cover up their wood that they have in the backyard. I'm just making suggestions with a tarp and then dry seasoned wood and educating the people.
Okay. Any other questions for Deputy Parlow before we let him sit down? Okay, thank you very much. It was very fulsome. Okay, we don't actually have a motion on the floor yet, so I mean we could start by putting one on the floor and then begin to amend it as a possibility. So anybody would like to do that to get us started, that would be good. Councillor Parker, go ahead.
Move that the amendments to be made to open air fires regulation P30 to limit the hours of use of outdoor burning appliances between 12 p.m. and 12 a.m. and to prohibit the use of outdoor burning appliances when a poor air quality advisory is issued by the province. And further, that enhanced public education for the City of Brandon with an emphasis on those areas of the city with a high density of outdoor burning appliances to identify the proper use of outdoor burning appliances as well as stressing the use of acceptable burning material.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cameron. Mover wish to speak?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well.
Okay. Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to amend the motion to include in the recommendations, of which I will be deferring later. That's why I won't be getting into a lot of discussion because we're not allowed to do that. I'll save it for next meeting. There is a reason behind the madness. First of all, one amendment I would like to make on the outdoor burning appliance recommendations is that people with chronic breathing disorders can apply for a 90-meter buffer zone with medical proof from a doctor that this is the case, and have that as we do with the mosquito fogging. Second amendment I'd like to make.
I think we need to. Okay, what was your game plan? You wanted to just.
I wanted to make the amendments and then defer it for discussion next meeting.
Yeah. So are you just going to put them out there, this is what you intend to, or do you want to table them as amendments right now, like move and second them?
Table them
as amendments, because I don't want to have a discussion on them. We can't, if I'm
Okay,
going to
so
defer
you
it,
want
I
to make
can't
this all
discuss
one
it.
amendment then, or you want to make several?
Well, there's a few, so we might want to do them one at a time, because I know some people aren't going to be
that's
happy
why I
with
was
some of them, and they
kinda
might want to, be okay with others. That's what I'm thinking, so.
That's why I wanted to stop you, so I'm going to have it that you've moved
One at a
the
time?
people with chronic breathing problems will be private 90-meter buffer zone with medical proof. So that's moved by Councillor Barry. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lupke. And you can speak to that if you like.
Okay, because I am going to defer everything, so.
Well, we can't really defer the.
That's why I was asking if I can make the amendments and defer everything.
Pass the amendments, okay, and then the motion as amended can be deferred.
Okay. Okay, briefly, I'll try to be brief on this because I didn't want to drag this out tonight.
You can help me out here. I would be prepared to have you just recite the amendments that you're proposing to make.
Okay.
And then so they won't really be moved and seconded. You're just going to inform us. Then we could defer and then come back and start in on the amendments.
Whatever works best, that's all I'm trying to get at.
Well, I mean, your point about it getting late and, because, I mean, it'll take a bit of debate.
It will, if I have to start talking about every one of them tonight.
So if it's okay with the city clerk, I would suggest that you not move the amendments, you inform us of the amendments.
And then defer the motion.
Then people, as you indicated, would be able to think about them.
Gotcha.
The fire department could also respond. Then we'll deal with the amendments, put them on the floor at the next meeting properly.
Okay, so that is my intention is to.
Yeah.
Is that okay, Madam Clerk?
So the original motion is not going to be voted on. It's
Right.
going to be deferred.
Right.
And then, but you are just giving your intent of
Yeah.
proposing
Perfect, okay.
amendments at that time.
Okay, so
Okay, good.
I guess my first motion is to
Okay.
defer this motion then, correct?
No,
No,
you could
I
tell us
think you
what
can
all
tell us
your
all.
Okay.
amendments are
All
going
my
to be. You
amendments
told us
first.
one.
Okay, so you got the one?
Yep.
Okay, the other one is with the poor air quality advisory is actually issued by the province, but actually outdoor burning appliances are not to be permitted when sustainable or gusting winds are over 25 kilometers an hour. City? Thirdly, that based on the number of outdoor burning appliance permits we have and don't have, is that my recommendation is that starting in the 2023 budget, is that a permit must be purchased yearly from the city of Brandon at the cost of $50 to operate an outdoor burning appliance. We're looking for new revenues. There's a way to do it. And also keep track of things.
Okay.
And I'll throw the one in there for hours. I know it's probably not going to go anywhere with the career, but I'm going to say that the hourly operations for fire pits are from 4 p.m. to 12 a.m.
Okay, yep, I don't know why you wouldn't hesitate to put that on there. I think that's
Yeah, it's, I know for
whatever
some
the
people,
hour's
like
gonna be.
Councillor Desjardins brought it out, it doesn't bother me, but there's a lot of people it does bother when fire pits are going at 9, 10 in the morning, and that it is a bit of an issue. So I just don't see the need for them going that early. I really don't.
Okay.
But
Thanks for all of that. But now, to be fair to other councillors, if you're waiting in great anticipation with Councillor Barry's potential amendments, thinking that he was going to cover off all of the rest of, if any of the rest of you had something you were likely going to propose, we'd love to hear it now, and then it just gives council the opportunity to think about it, and probably the fire department also to be able to respond. So, Councillor Cullen?
Thank you, Your Worship. The one thought that I had is that in order to, as part of the permit process, that you would need to have consulted both your neighbors on each side of your property, so that at least you knew you weren't going into a position immediately next to you that you may be able to have to get the permission from each of your neighbors on each side, just to say that it's okay with them to have the permit because it affects them the most.
Okay, we can flesh that out, bearing in mind some people have, you have a school behind you, but some people have a neighbor behind you.
Yeah.
So you might have more than two.
I've retired my wood burning appliance, so it's like...
Any others that you wanted to highlight, Councillor Chaboyer?
Thank you, Worship. I think that it should be included on the enhanced public education portion that all material related to the fire burning should also explain how it impacts the environment. Like a big picture statement.
Yeah. Okay, any others?
Are these like anything we can throw out there right now, just potentially discussing next time? Because I'm thinking like a limit on the length of time you can have your, like, forget the day, like 8 to 8, but you can only have a fire going for 4 hours, right? And I don't know how we would police it, but certainly I think it's something we should entertain. Fire police. Get punchy.
So this is a bit of a, those that are still observing, this is a little bit of an unorthodox way we do things, but I don't mind it because I think it will inform the process better, and then we can take a break and come back another day everybody have a chance of thought. Some people are watching and might provide some feedback to us. So, and again, I like the fact that our administration can say, okay, that one can work, this one we would have difficulty with. You know, we might as well know that. There's no point passing stuff that's completely unenforceable. So I like this process. Okay, if we've got those sort of loosely on the table, a motion to defer is, I think, the direction you wanted to take.
Yes,
Councilor Berry?
Your Worship, I'd like to make a motion to defer this motion until the next meeting on June 20th.
Seconder, please. Councilor Lupke. Not debatable. So we're going to call a question on that. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much for everybody's thoughtful input, including some of our citizens that came out, and particularly Councillor Parlow and your team for having done a fair bit of work on this.
Got a demotion.
Councillor Parlow.
Councillor Parlow.
It's getting late. It is getting late.
Let the cat out of the bag. Eh?
Cool. It was late. Night, Councillor.
Good night, Councillor.
Okay, next item, Madam Clerk.
Under the order of bylaws, Your Worship, bylaw number 7335, which is an amendment to the tree protection bylaw.
Councillor Desjarlais.
Thank you, through your worship. I move that bylaw number 7335 to amend tree protection bylaw number 7285 to clarify terms and general housekeeping amendments be read a second time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Chaboyer. And whoever wishes to speak, or do we have anybody presenting on this one? I don't know if we do.
Thank you, through your worship. I think we just asked administration to provide more clarity in the bylaw, and
yes,
reading through it, I think that they've done what we've requested they do. So I think it's clear, unless anybody had any concerns with the language they're using.
I agree with you. Okay, we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Third reading would be in order.
Thank you, through your worship. I move that the bylaw be read a third and final time.
Seconder, Councillor Chaboyer. And third reading, recorded vote is required. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously with Councillor Berry just out of the room. Next item, please.
Bylaw number 7336, which is to open the east-west sidewalk along Maryland Avenue.
Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that bylaw number 7336 to legally open the multi-use pathway along Maryland Avenue be read a first time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Frangi. And first reading, not normally debatable. I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we're going to be here a while. Next item, please.
Giving of notice, Your Worship.
Councillor Desjarlais.
Thank you, to your worship. I'm giving notice that I would like to consider amending the notification time required for parking bans in the downtown before events.
Thank you. And any other giving of notice? Seeing none. Next item, please.
Motion to adjourn would be in order, Your Worship.
For hooped.
Wow.
Boyer, seconded by Councillor Lupke. Good fill in. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, everyone.
He's lost his place.
Yeah.